So that's what we did. We created this front page and some customizations. Nothing too fancy. We added a custom logo. We made the date show up here and stuff like that. The talk was definitely the highlight yesterday, and then the talk view. So the talk, lots of Python, the talk view, lots of React. And I use, this is what I was showing right now. I use source tree to visualize my Git history, and we are at the talk view tag in the front end, which is the package Volto PloneConf, and at the talks tag in the Python package, which is PloneConf site. So you can see that by the head sign that says that it shows here. You don't need to use that. You can do that all by hand, but if you tags are in Git are not, I'd say they are not first class citizens, because the code doesn't show the tag. So this is the code, and if you can see here, this is the code, and my front end shows the revision and not the tag. So if I say git status, it tells me, oh, something has changed. So it's a detached head, but not at this revision, but at this tag. So something obviously has changed in at least my Git config, which is good, because I'm always annoyed if I don't see the tags. So I have 4 terminals here. Both on the top are the running instances. This is the front end, started with yarn start, and this is the back end with bin instance fg. So it's already running, it's prepared, and this is the code state. Yeah, I don't know if I'm actually going to need that right now or soon. There were just 2 tiny things that I wanted to explain that we did yesterday that may not have come across in their importance. Number 1 is the package that you created as a front end. As I said yesterday, it contains the whole of Volto in Omelette in this package. So this is, it's not, you didn't check out Volto. It is installed by yarn start, or yarn, when you run yarn, or then it ran the installation, and it created a symlink to this. So this is not part of your source code. The part when you commit this to if you do your own project, if you do that, you should definitely look at the training Volto add-ons by Tiberio. That is brand new and really good. So this is the code that you would commit, and so some of this as well, where you define the dependencies that will end up in your Git repository. And so this depends on Plone, and it extends Plone in various ways. And I can, the important thing that I wanted to show is that this file, we did a couple of changes here. And what it does is it imports the default settings of Volto, and then it extends or changes them. It doesn't, you don't put in a INI file, for example, that has all the configuration, and you change your settings, and then that's your configuration for this application. And when the next version comes around, you'll have to figure out yourself what your changes are, because in this case, you always use the defaults unless you change them. So that is a pattern that will repeat itself over and over again when you do Plone development, either in the back end or in the front end, and it makes it much easier to get along with changing versions and changing features in Plone and in Volto, in the front end and in the back end. If you, for example, this part here, export const views, uses default views. So this is default views. I guess it's a map or an object. Actually, not sure what it is. I could check that what it is from config. So Plone Volto config is a file that has all the settings, and you don't override this file. You don't import this. Yeah, you import that, but you don't change the whole file. You just inject little parts in it and change little parts of that. That makes it much, much easier to go with the flow when Volto changes, and it actually changes fast. And when Plone changes, which just doesn't change that fast, but it still changes. So here, default views is important, and default views has a key in it called content type views. That again is an object or a map. I guess it's a map. Then that how's it called? The three dots in JavaScript. Someone help me. I always forget how it's called. It's not unroll something.
Destructuring, if I'm not mistaken.
Come again?
Three dots are ellipses, or no?
No.
No.
Okay.
Destructuring?
No, it's not destructuring. Okay, let's check, because it's a very this is the very best JavaScript documentation, and there should be the this is the array that's not interesting. Here are my this is obviously an expression or an operator, and it is called spread. Thank you. So this is a spread. Sorry for not knowing this by heart, but my JavaScript is, I wasn't born with JavaScript knowledge. So the spread operator, that's it basically takes this apart and extends it. And so you change in default views, you assign talk to the talk view of the content types views that come from Volto. So this is very important, that you don't override the whole thing of it. You don't fork Volto. This change that you did will probably work in Volto 20 the same as it does in Volto 10, which we're using right now. This is the one thing that I wanted to show. And basically, starting with the next chapter, there were two things that might have irritated you with good reason, and but you didn't complain about that. I'm going to show you both. First was the in the chapter the features of Plone. Not the features of Plone. What is Plone? I talked shortly about schema-driven content, and it says at some point I said Plone content is made out of schemata. Schemata is plural for schema, and why am I saying this? It becomes clear when I click here and I click on edit, and you look closely at what you're seeing here, and you remember what you wrote in Python in the schema, because you remember we could change something that is not visible in the navigation for folders. We can set tags for content. You remember the publishing date that I talked about? Even the title and the summary, none of that was part of our schema, because Plone content mostly is made out of schemata, plural, and we only wrote one schema. So where are the other schemas? That's where the next chapter begins, because the next chapter deals with behaviors. Actually, it doesn't. That is fun. Hang on, where is it? Yes, here it is. So it deals with behaviors. Behaviors are additional schemata that can be applied, can be used for content types. And the extremely cool thing is about schemata is you can reuse them. So you have say like you define a schema for talks, and you define that as a behavior. Then you can turn anything else also into a talk. If you say you also have this schema on top of that. Let's use a more simple example to drive that point home. So I'm going to skip the whole theory thing here, and we're going to use we're going to create a schema with a Boolean flag for content that will allow us to mark all or flag content that should be visible on the front page, because it is really, really important for some reason. We're not going to do that through the web. We're going to do that programmatically. And again, we need some more boilerplate in our backend to be able to use that to register our schema. I'll do that quickly. So we need a folder called behavior. No, we don't need that. I decide I'm going to move that here. This is just a convention. Behaviors, plural. So this is my folder. And it's a Python module, so it needs a .init.py file. And now it gets more interesting. It also needs a configure.zml file. Configure.zml. I explained yesterday shortly that ZZML is stands for ZOP component markup language, and this is where you register your views. In other frameworks like Flask or Django, you can do that with decorators. Plone has had a logic to do the same with decorators, so you didn't have to use any more ZZML. But yeah, the collective wisdom of the Plone community decided to use ZZML all the time and not depend on registering everything as decorators. There is a whole story about that I'm not going to go into. So let's ignore that for now. It's just the way it is. This is how you register a behavior. I'll talk about this in a second. So a Python module, behaviors is a Python module because it has an init.py, is read on startup. So when you start up Plone, Plone knows about this module, which has nothing so far except for the init.py. But the configure.zml needs to is not a Python file. It needs to be registered to be read in the main configure.zml file of the package. So I go to the main configure.zml file, and for example, below browser, I just include the it's called package because, yeah, for some reason it's called package. It's a folder, and this folder, this Python module, then should have a file configure.zml. Yep. So this is what we did so far. Let's create the behavior itself. It should end up in the same folder. Call it featured.py. And here is the code for that. I will explain it quickly. There's a space missing, obviously. Complains about a missing space. This is it. So this looks familiar already. You remember we wrote the talk content type here. iTalk, class iTalk inherits from model schema. I featured model schema. So the only difference between this schema and that schema is the way it's registered in ZZML. So this is registered as a behavior. It's not registered as a content type in generic setup here in types. I don't have a behaviors XML file that registers behaviors. They are read on startup by the configure.zml and are made available. The other difference is that it also provides the interface iForm field provider, which tells Plone, yes, please create a form for that field that is defined here. Otherwise, you can easily have a behavior, but the form will not show up for that. So there's not going to be a checkbox for this. And then there's a Boolean field. It's really simple. We don't need the Unicode thing. We also don't need the coding thingy here because we are doing Python 3 only and not any Python 2. So this is basically done. At the moment that I start up my backend, I have this behavior available. I'll do that and show you where you can find that. Oops, I'm not logged in. Obviously not properly, at least. Yep. So dexterity content types. So I showed yesterday that you can create content types through the web in this form. You can assign attributes to types, like what if it's a folder, what can you add into that, what's the name and stuff like that, and add this, modify the schema. You can also modify the behaviors. And here it becomes interesting, because if we look for checked boxes, we find doubling core metadata, and this is a behavior that adds, it says add standard metadata fields, and this is why we have title, description, creation date, and all that. There are a lot of other behaviors that are available in Plone that are not enabled, except for one, name from title, and versioning. These are the ones that are enabled, and you can find these in the definition of the type that we added to the type here. So here is a list of behaviors. So these are the 3 enabled behaviors where the box is ticked, and these are the only ones here. So the quick way, and I'm going to use the quick way, you see our new behavior shows up here, featured. We can just use that and press save. And at that moment, it is already saved. And when I go to our talk, still only have one talk, and I click on edit, I see at the bottom, I see a new field that shows up. So the schema defines the fields, and the schemata are combined. You can decide, I want to show this field, for example, in a different field set. It should be in settings, but I think it should be on the front page, on the main tab, because that's where you need that. So this is a good feature to have. Let's not check this box yet. Let's first see that. So this feature says show items on the front page. What kind of items could we possibly want to show on the front page? There are several. Let's add news items to be able to show on the front page by checking this box. And let's even add pages. Why not? So everything that has this checked box will now show up on the front page. Really? No, it won't, because the only thing we're doing now is we're storing a Boolean value on the Python object. The REST API passes this information to the front end, but it has no idea what to do with that. So there's featured. You're featured, good for you. I don't know what featured is because I'm a computer. So there is a couple things that we should do to actually use that. But step back, I forgot something. I clicked this box manually, but the code we're writing needs to be reusable. So next year, when the next Plone conference arrives, talks should also already have this behavior enabled. So what do? We extend the talk FTI, the factory type information. It's just a stupid name for this configuration file that we use here, the talk XML, and we add this behavior here. And it has a name. So how do you? This is not a Python path. You remember, this is a Python path. This is not a Python path. This is a name. So it's a named behavior, and it's registered with a name. So we could actually, and Plone allows that, we could use use the Python path to the schema of the behavior here, but it's discouraged because if you move stuff around, it is hard to to upgrade them. So it's a much better practice to give them a name. It's like the UUID with the content. If you move the content around, your links are still working. If you change your code, where, like, for example, you move your featured behavior to somewhere else, then the Python path changes, and then your behavior will be broken if Plone has to look at the Python path for that behavior. If it has a name, say, like a UUID, it can look up the behavior by name, which it will always be found with this name, no matter where it is. So this is a very good practice to give the behavior a name. You register a behavior with Plone behavior, title, name, description, and well, the description and the title go together in the user interface. The name is the one that you register it with and can look it up as it's an adapter basically. And it the provides thingy here that points to the Python path. So what is this here? This is not a Python path. Why does it start with a dot? This is a partial Python path. This is a relative Python path. I'm not a big fan of relative Python paths, but they have a huge upside because if you move stuff around, you don't have to, sometimes you don't have to change them, but I like to be more specific. And I would say behaviors dot featured IPython. So here we have our Plone package. It's a namespace package, the module behaviors, the module featured, which is a file, and the class iFeatured. So this is an absolute Python path. You can do whatever you like, but this will not work because then it will expect a Python package called featured. That's only the dot makes it a relative path. So this is, yeah, you can shoot yourself in the foot if you do that the wrong way. So I will disable the behavior just quickly. So you behaviors featured, bam. So to get this working, what do I need to do? So there are a couple of options. One, restart your instance. Will this work? Help? No, it will. Restarting an instance will read ZZML and and Python files. Reloading the page will not work at all because this will only see changes on templates, for example, classic style templates. So what do we need to do? We need to run build out. No, we don't need to run build out because we're not changing the overall Plone configuration. We're not adding new add-ons, new dependencies. We just added our own code. So we have to reinstall the package because when we reinstall the package, our Python package PloneConf site, the XML files, everything that is in profiles default will be read again and will be applied. And if we will get to that later. Let me quickly do that. No, I don't have to restart now because I already did that. I'll go to the add-ons user interface and look for PloneConf site, uninstall that, and then install it again and check for my talk. Does it have this behavior? Yes, it does. Let's check this box and save. Okay, so step one. We can commit this. This is now reusable in the next project next year. That's fine. What do we need to do to make this show up on the front page? Plone has a built-in search engine. So that's Plone's Google, and it's called the catalog. Portal catalog, it's a technical term for that. And it allows you to search for content with arbitrary attributes. And you can define these attributes yourself. For example, and that's the easiest way, and that's what we're going to do, you have an index that you're looking for. and this index is the same name as a field. So the value in the field ends up in the index, and then you can look for that. You could also go it the other way around. You could say, okay, Plone, give me all the talks, and then go through all the talks and give me the talks that are that have this featured thing with a true. This attribute featured should be true there. There's a huge downside to that. Imagine you have a website with 20,000 talks. You'd have to get every single talk, inspect every single talk, check if it's a featured talk, and then throw everything else away. And do the same with every other content where you enable this behavior. If you have a huge site, this can take way too much time. So this is why you have this search engine. And to add a new index, we're going to add a new index for this search engine by modifying another XML file. I'm sorry, there's plenty of XML files to go around. It's called catalog XML, and it ends up in profiles default. So there is a catalog XML already there. It's created by your boilerplate when Plone created. When you ran build out, it's just to check this out. I didn't write that. Oops, this is a file. We're just going to change that, and we're going to add an index here. Oops. And you can already see the index name is the same as the attribute that is stored on the field. That's the value should be the same in this case, but you can also say, I'm going to call my index something, and I'm going to index actually something completely different. This is source for confusion, so it's a good idea to keep these the same, keep things simple. And you can also define the index type. It's all documented. It's linked to in the training what index types there are. This is it's a Boolean field, so there's a Boolean index. We could also say that's the most common one. It's a field index. It will store all values, but Boolean indexes are more effective because they can only store a true or false value. So they take up way less bytes, basically. It doesn't really matter in this case, but if you have a huge database, it's a good idea to keep to do that. So what do we need to do now? We can reinstall our package again. I will do that. And then the XML file will be read. You don't have to restart the site if you add an XML file. Plone just checks for these XML files and adds them. So now we have an index. Good. What do we do with it? With this index? Nothing yet. But we could search for that. I'll show you how do we move this stuff around here. Yep. So in classic Plone, you could do a couple things as an admin, which is really useful. I haven't shown you this before. This is the SOAP admin SOAP management interface. It gives you a low-level access to a lot of the tools that Plone that power Plone. Sorry, one of them is the portal catalog. So it's here, portal catalog. You can inspect the portal catalog. You can look for everything that is indexed in the portal catalog. What is indexed for this object? What you can look for example, and then you can see all the indexes. And now there should be a new index called featured. Hopefully, yes, here is my index. Featured has a Boolean. It's a Boolean index. Has two values, true and false, obviously. And yeah, that's it. So in classic Plone, we could actually use the default search to search for this content. If we, let's say, search for Plone, you see the URL changes to this searchable text equals Plone, and searchable text is one and the most important index. If I say featured equals 1, I get all the content. Oh, I should get all the content that is searched. Let's see. and 0. Yeah, maybe I have to reconfigure. Oh, I have to re-index my the index. Yeah, probably I didn't do that. That's a good point. Hang on. Because I created the index, but the object, I didn't change the object after I did that. So let me quickly re-index, rebuild the index. Say this index should be refreshed. You don't have to memorize all of this, not at all. It's all covered in the training. Say re-index. Bam. And let's see, let's hope this works. Maybe so featured. Oops, featured equals 1 should. Yeah, there's my talk. Excellent. So proof that it works. Plone actually works, but still, we can't use this index in Volto without programming, but we want to use it without programming. So remember, when we edited the front page, we added this listing block, and here we have criteria of news item and stuff like and other things. These use indexes. This is basically a catalog search. The problem is that you have to jump through another. It's not that huge of a big of a hoop, but you have to jump through another hoop. Oh, I forgot about that. We will need this later. It's not important right now, but we will need it later. We have to jump through another hoop to make this index show up here. So when I click on criteria, I have to add another, this shows up here. Because you just saw the list of indexes, it was much longer than this. So there are way more indexes than criteria. And guess how you register criteria? You guessed correct, another XML file. It's a bit tedious and repetitive, but we'll just do that. So the target, so we already solved the last chapter, because we created a behavior that can be reused across different content types. But now we want to make use of that. In the classic Plone training, we wanted to show that, show it on the front page. That it's very important, and write that catalog query for ourselves in Python. Here we are too lazy to do that. We want Plone to do that for us. The only thing we need is to register a query string, a criterion. Here, there is a new criterion that we're registering. This is, I can never remember how to write these correctly. So don't worry. I always copy and paste these. There are a couple more examples later in the training for different use cases. There are pretty tricky criterions if you when it comes to dates and time, because then you say larger than, between these and that, these states. They're not that easy to create, but it's doable. So what we need is, there is a registry that we're going to talk about later. There is a registry folder in the profiles default, in the default profile, that contains everything that ends up in the Plone registry. We'll cover that later. Let's create a file that is called query string. Queries. You can call it whatever you like. It's just it's a good idea to give it a name that fits what's in there, because we're defining a new criterion for query strings, because the user interface that you're seeing here, this is Plone app built by Plone app query string, basically. So it uses Plone app query string. So this is all. There's some explanation here that you can read later. Again, we changed the XML file, or we added an XML file for the profile, we have to reinstall our package. Let's do this quickly. Site setup, add-ons, Plone site, uninstall and install. And now, I hope so at least, wrong site, schedule, no, not schedule, front page, edit. Let's see what happens. Criterion type, featured. There it is, voila, success. My fancy red button is gone. I'll enable that again. Here, featured, bam. And I can say yes or no. Obviously, I want yes. And then I save. And you already saw that, hang on, did I do something wrong here? Yeah, caching. Obviously, again, some catalog queries are cached for a while, not forever. So if I navigate away and come back, let's see, no, but if, yeah, sorry, not no, but yes, it updated and now there's only one talk. This is really important. Talk submission is now over, like we have all the talks that we want. Imagine that. And we say, okay, this should also show up. And if we go here, there it is. We can, the listing block is also nice because we can sort sort on no selection, which is nonsense. We should sort that on effective date, reversed order, so that the newer items are on top. And it's looking like this because this was created before that, I think, or the other way around, whatever. You'll figure it out. So this is really cool. But another issue raises its head, and I don't want to get too much into that, but you'll have to think about that when you talk to a client. Again, the date here, we have now one featured box. If we say, hey, events, news, and talks, they should all show up on the front page, but which date do you want to show? The date of the party, the news item publishing date, the creation date, the modifying date, and so on. Keep in mind that you can't just throw them all in a box. We're doing that anyway, so that's okay. Okay, we did this. Yeah, we did all this already. Ooh, excellent. Good. Are there any urgent questions regarding this last set of features? So behaviors, we'll revisit them in the 2 chapters on, I think, and that's really exciting. It's a very, very powerful feature. I use them daily, basically. And these criterions, I use them rarely, actually, because I tend to write all my stuff in code, but they are really powerful for because it allows editors who don't have programming experience to construct catalog queries from data that doesn't exist yet. There are a couple more examples where this comes in handy that I'll show you later. Let's get on with it, I'd say. So next, so one of the, okay, we have a website, we have talks, we have news items, we even have a nice image. This is taken by my good friend Stefan Antonelli at the, when we were in San Francisco for the Plone conference in 2011, maybe? Something like that. Yeah, wonderful conference there. So,
hey, Philip, you've got a question in the chat that you may want to address before you move on.
Okay, haven't seen any. Which one? You mean the one from yesterday?
Just now we had one, is behavior global for all content types? Ivan asks.
Where was that question? Why am I not seeing that? Oh, it's in the chat, in the Zoom chat.
Yeah.
Oh, please use the chat, the Slack chat, but I'll open the Zoom chat if I find it. which would be really cool to do. Where is that chat here? Is behavior global for all content types? It's globally available for all content types. It is not enabled automatically for all content types, but we can, well, it's your choice to decide if you want that enabled or not. There are a couple of behaviors like named from, no, actually there's not a single behavior that is shared by all content types in Plone. For example, yeah, we saw that name from title behavior, name from title, yeah. So when you create a content type in Plone, a content object, some content in Plone, you create, type the name, and Plone creates a URL from that. And the URL is also the ID, and that's name from title. That's name equals ID in this case. But for files and images, you don't, the title field, it is not a required field. So if you leave that empty, that would result in no ID, no URL, which would be stupid. So they have a different behavior. It's called name from file name. So if the file name, the file, image or PDF or whatever, is a required field, so it always has one. So the ID, the URL of that object, is auto-generated from the file name that you upload. It's just one example of these tiny things that took a while to get right in Plone. So, okay. I hope I answered this this question correctly. If not working, please ask even more questions. Ask way more questions than yesterday. I didn't get a lot of. Maybe I answered all questions before you could ask them. That would be good. But I doubt that I'm such a genius. So next, we have talks. No, actually, we have. I only have one talk, but. Think about the fact that we will have a lot of talks. Volto, yeah, is the thing, whatever. Let's add some text here. So, let's at least add a Latin description. This is, let's say, this is a keynote. Now let's make that a talk as well. The audience is this is basically for everyone. The speaker is Victor. Okay, the concept. Victor at plone.org. I'm not gonna add a lot of talks because that will take, I know that. I hope I didn't ruin his name. Never mind. Let's give him a biography at least. Good. So we have this. I'm actually publishing it. Excellent. So, and since we can do that, let's just copy and paste. And I'm actually not sure if this is, no, you can't edit the titles. Can you? Yeah, you can rename. Volto is the thing. Let's say React. You should know React. So what I'm showing here are some advanced editing features for content editors. You should know React. And another title is migrations are hard. Migrations. They're not that hard. So I hope this worked. Yep, it did. So I now have 4 talks. This is not the talk list I want. I want at least the speaker name and stuff like that. And I want the trainings to show up here as well, but the trainings are in a different folder. So they're here. There's no training yet. Let's add a training for the fun of it, yeah, obviously mastering Plone 6, and it is a training. Just fill in the required fields. That is good. So I want a listing of all the talks. So this is the next requirement. It is totally normal. It happens in every project that you want custom listings. You want to show certain stuff or add some interactivity to that. So that's absolutely normal to want that. So we're not going to do that in the back end, obviously, but we're going to do that in the front end. And again, we're creating a new component. We're not changing an existing component. We could decide to change this view. We already did. We changed the summary view to show the date, remember? And now it bites us because, like, why does it say December 6th for migrations is hard? Because my talk on migrations, that was last year, not 2020, but 2019 and whatever. So overwriting these views is probably not the right solution. Let's create a talk list. So it's a new component. We have to, same as with the talk view, now we create a talk list view. We're going to create a new file in src components views. We already have the folder views here in my code. So src components views, here's my talk view. I'm going to create a new file here called talk list.jsx. And I'm going to add the same placeholder that I did yesterday for the talk view. It just says I'm the talk list component so that when I render it, it'll show up. And then I'm going to add another convenience import. So I'm going to import talk list view from talk list, obviously. Is it actually called talk list view? Yeah, it is. So that is correct. And then I'm going to return both of them. So not only one, but both. So that makes it easier for them to be imported here, because this is our configuration again. But now we're not talking about a view for a new content type. We have to change a view for an existing content type, because the content type I'm looking at here, hang on, schedule is a folder. But I think the story actually says we want that to be for documents. No, folder, select the, for folders. Yes, for folders. Excellent. So these folders are not, they're a bit different, registered a bit different. They're registered in the setting, also in the same, here in, where is it? Volto config. If you go in there, there is everything. So the default, this is not the content type view. In this case, we're talking about the layout views. So we're going to add that to the default views. The spread operator is in use again. And I have to also import the talk list view here. And since I saved without importing the right thing, I probably got an error message already, but if I reload again, it'll work again because it's not used. I'm not calling this view, but the import is now working. Before that, it did hot reloading and it complained that, hey, you're using talk list view here with the name talk list view, but it's not imported. So what are you doing? So now I did it right. Basically, this would be done now if I start up my Volto instance again. I'm going to do that quickly here in the terminal, yarn start. This should work, but the code in Volto has a check if the content type where I'm using a view for actually has that view registered to be available for it. There are lots of these checks. We're gonna encounter another of these checks when it comes to custom control panels. Sometimes they are more annoying than helpful, but it saves you from registering something that is then not available. It is okay. It takes some time to get used to. So what we need to do basically is go to the backend and register a new view for the folder content type, but we only have configuration for document, portal, a Plone site, and talk. So we don't even have the folder here. We need to add it, and we need to reinstall the package, but we don't want to. We're too lazy to do that. So we just go to the backend, and again we go to the ZOAP management interface, because all of the configuration that you load when you install an add-on, only when you install the add-on, this is actually activated, because you can have like 50 add-ons in your site, but only install 2 of those. If everything that you would have in your add-ons would automatically be enabled, that would be horrible, because you can have, that's a feature, you can have multiple Plone sites in the same ZOAP instance. Crazy, but there are universities that have hundreds and hundreds of Plone sites in the same ZOAP instance, and they sometimes have different add-ons. So if there's code and or configuration, in this case, generic setup configuration, it would automatically be enabled. All the pages would look the same, but they shouldn't. Yeah. So instead, we're going to do that by hand, because all the configuration has a visual representation in Plone itself. In this case, we're configuring the types, and there is the portal types tool, obviously. And there are all our types, and we can see for the talk, for example, we have everything that we configured in the XML file, down to the permission that is required to be able to add this type, because well, maybe we don't allow adding talks to just every contributor. Maybe only special contributors get this permission. So here are behaviors, and there are views and stuff like that. So we go, in this case, we're looking for the folder content type. Here's the folder, and there are a couple of views available, and we're going to add our new view. That's the talk list. I actually have no idea how to spell that, so I'm going to check talk list _ view. That's how we spell it here. Let's close this. Not using it. Talk list _ view. Save it, but not the HTML page, but click on save, and we're done. So now, when I open my folder that is called schedule, I should have a talk list view available. And when I click on it, it says I'm the talk list component. So this works. Okay, now we just did the registration, the boilerplate in the backend and in the front end, so that it actually works. Now we can start writing the talk list view. It's almost 4 o'clock. Let's finish this chapter, and maybe we'll take a break then. Not maybe, we will take a break then. It's not an optional break. This is how you register the talk list view in XML. This change needs to go here. I'm not going to do that because it already works. Here's my talk list view. So let's start. I'll copy this part into my new view, close everything else. So here's my talk list view component. And remember, in the talk view, we had props here, and that is content. That's the object itself. In this case, content is the folder that we're using it on. So if we look at this view, I guess I have to reload here. Ooh, why is nothing happening? Let's click here and then here. This is weird. Oh, oh, I changed the talk. Did I? No, I didn't. I changed the talk list. Save. Are we reloading here? Why isn't this thingy here reloading? Volto is not reloading. Houston, we have a problem. What? Yeah, this is obviously nonsense, but still. Okay, let's just restart that. And maybe I forgot to restart it before. I think I did after adding the talk list JSX, but could be that since it's not imported anywhere where it's actually useful, like in the config.js, the hot reloading didn't know about that yet. Just guessing here. It'll take a second to load. So what I wanted to say is content is now the folder. So I'm showing the content title here in a header. So H1, heading 1, document first heading. Again, this is the CSS class. Since H1 is not, we're not writing raw HTML here. This is a React component for heading 1, and this will be transformed into the CSS class. So name will go away, but class is a reserved name. And the content of that will be the title, which is talk list view. So the only thing that it show up would be talk list, a schedule, foo, and whatever I added as a description for this, for schedule for that folder. I certainly, yay. I obviously didn't add a description. Let's do that. Our amazing talks. Yes. So excellent. This works. Drop the foo. Let's see if hot reloading. It doesn't hot reload. Why doesn't it hot reload? Okay. Not sure. Can anyone tell me why my Volto is not hot reloading? This is super irritating. Okay, still, let's talk about the code. So here, we're going to skip this part because there was a breaking change in Volto that I'm not going to go into. To show the talks, let's use this iteration here. Bam. Does it reload? Why doesn't it reload? Yarn start, please. Okay, so let's talk about the code that we've written here. So a couple of things look familiar. Let's talk about these first so that you don't get lost. The imports, yeah, they're imports. You've seen this before, the color mapping. It's an object that has that beginner, advanced, professional, and the colors. You remember what they're used for these little buttons. So each talk will obviously somehow show this. Let's skip this here for now. Then we have a container, article, content. So this is just another semantic UI. No, this is actually not semantic UI. This is a HTML tag. We're using a header here with the description and the title. And then we're doing this, and this is interesting. So results and results map item. So obviously somehow we're getting results, which is the result of something we're doing above. And then we're iterating over these results. So 4 item in results for the Python heads in the audience. And then for each item in results, we're rendering a segment. It's a semantic UI component, padded, which gives it a little padding, so it looks nice. And we're using links and stuff like that. So there's the image, obviously, of the speaker probably, and the description and some. So this is really self-explaining because we've seen that before. Here we take the audience from the item or the token in this case, then we get the color from the audience. So and then we create a label. This is the little color thing, an image, there's a description. That is, just renders the description in a div. And then we also add a link to the object. We'll talk about the link quickly, and we'll talk about the more important part, because here we're using the search endpoint of the Plone REST API, but we're not using the search endpoint directly. So there's no JavaScript here that does a query to some endpoint and parses the results. Volto does that for us. We're defining a query here in search content, where to search, what content type to search, and to please return the full objects because we need all the information, including the image of these. And we're subscribing to the global state of Volto, oh God, Katja would be so nice if you would be here and save me the embarrassment of not being a native React developer. So to make things short, whenever you use a search query, a catalog query in classic Plone, and you query the portal catalog, this is what you do in Volto. And it always looks the same. Here is your query. You define a search content. You have your various attributes. This indexes that you can search for. We could, for example, say featured. Wow, is true. So featured should be true. Then it only returns talks where the feature tag is set. We're not going to do that because we want all the talks. Hey, hot reloading now works for some reason. I saw that. And we're subscribing to the state of the React application so that whenever the data on the website changes, or if you have two queries on the same page, that works well. It just works. Let's leave it at that. This is not a React training. Let's see what actually happens when we render that. I hope it's not gonna. Yeah, excellent. It's gonna throw a error message because item type of talk token. Why? What's the complaint here? Let's see. Link is my link. So this is type of talk, title or token. Title, item title. So that's weird. I should be getting type of talk. We didn't add type of talk to the index or metadata, so it should be to the metadata, and we're getting the full objects from the backend, from the REST API. So item type of talk should be there. Let's see if we, yes?
I have something similar when I uninstall and reinstall the package plone-conf because it loses the featured behavior. Every time I reinstall,
because you didn't add the featured behavior.
I have to mark the behavior every time. So I don't know if you have the same situation.
You shouldn't. You should. Oh, there maybe is a bug in the code. Let's see. Talks, behaviors. That's really good. It's really good of you to point that out because there is actually a bug here because it says behaviors. What it should say is behaviors, and it should say purge equals false. So this, the previous iteration removed the, if you didn't have this, because this is not was not in the code that you had, this would enable only these. And it's a really good practice to not purge behaviors when a project is iterating. Imagine you have 3 add-ons that add additional features, and every single add-on says, I'm the only one who knows the truth. This looks like American politics then. Horrible. So we're doing it the same way, and everybody adds his bit of truth. Actually, this analogy doesn't really hold up very well, but still, you get my point.
Yes.
So let's try to debug this anyway. So there is results, and I don't. Let's see. Okay, it would be so good to have a React developer here. Okay, let's skip ahead to the last iteration. This is the last iteration. I hate it when this happens. Let's see. It used to work. It used to work. So maybe I did an error when copying and pasting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check out the code for the end of this chapter. This is a little embarrassing, but still it happens to the best of us. So here is my front end. Let's shut the front end down. Let's do, yep. Git, the command was clean fd. So clean, force also directories, remove everything that was not part of the repository, and stash all changes that are made to files that are part of that repository, and then check out the talk list tag. I just do that by clicking here. It does it for me. And then I say git status. Oops. It should tell me I'm now, yeah, it's interesting. Now it says I'm on that's the difference. That's interesting, because if I say git check out talk list, I'm at the exact same revision. So here you see E1D, it's E1D, but if I say git status, it tells me, yeah, it doesn't. Git is so irritating sometimes. I love it and I hate it at the same time. Okay, yarn start. Let's hope that the code that we have in the repository actually does what it's supposed to do. I'm pretty sure it does. But let's see if we get a surprise. If someone figures out what the issue here was, I must have been doing something wrong, but I don't know what at the moment. And I'm not getting a trace back from the backend. So the backend, when the REST API does the search, it could, I don't know, there could be an error in the backend. This would show up a Python traceback here. And the front end error message that I got didn't tell me what was going on. Oh God, no. Audience, it is, so there is something important at the beginning of this training, and I should tell that to myself all the time. The features of Plone. Where is it? Plone has many message boxes. They contain important information. Read them and make sure you understand them. I should make a sign, read the traceback and read the message for myself, because I looked at the page with the traceback, now it's gone, but I didn't read the title. And the title of the traceback explained the error message. Yep, item audience is null. So the code, even that instance of the code doesn't work. So there is a bug, and it is the same problem that we had before. Item audience that I explained yesterday with simple select fields. So item audience maps to item, and that is just not okay, because we need That is really bad. We need, that is not, oh, there, I created a talk that has no audience. Yeah, that is obviously, there's no bug in the code. There's a bug in my data. It's not a bug. I just did something that didn't make a lot of sense. Hang on, what am I doing here? So where is my audience here? So what I need to do is say, if item audience actually exists, then iterate over item audience. If it doesn't exist, please ignore it. I hope this will, yes. So yeah, my training doesn't have an audience. Stupid me, but I should have cared about that in the code. So it is the developer's job. If the field is not a required field, it's entirely my fault, the developer's fault, that you have to catch the case that there is no data in a field that is not required. I did that. This is for beginners and for advanced, I'd say. Save, schedule, I get my list, and now I get my training. So sorry about that. We should totally make something for professionals only, just to be annoying. Make it a bit more colorful, yay. So yeah, good. Reading tracebacks, excellent. This is, yeah, not jumping into that anymore. So this is, so what's interesting? What else is interesting about that? So we're happy, almost happy, because this looks horrible if the description is too short. So, but this is not a theming training, it's a development training. So you should give that back to your designer, say, yeah, or the person who wrote the design said, what happens if this is shorter than expected? Then it looks terrible. Let's add at least one semi-long description here so that you see how it should look like in that case. Yeah, much better. Almost. Should be longer still. So what's interesting? The image, we've seen that before. We've seen that before. So what do you see happening when I click here? Did you see a page reload? No. The reason for that is that we're using link instead of, oops, a href equals whatever, something, because that would render a normal link, and then it would redirect, not redirect, it would render that page. When you use link, which is not from semantic UI, it's from by React Router DOM, it will create a internal link, and it will behave as something that it is, as like a React application, and you don't get a full page reload. The upside obviously is it is way faster than a normal website, which would have to reload the whole content from the server. Unless you have good caching, the speed difference is really obvious when clicking for a couple of times. So this is the link, and there is, other than that, there is nothing really fancy about that. Whenever you use a catalog query, I'm sorry, the highlighting is off here. We need to move that one line up. Just copy and paste this to your use case and adapt it to your needs. If you want to understand that further and what's going on in the background in React, feel free to jump into the React training at some point. There is a lot of very interesting stuff going on around there. And part of that is actually explained here in terms that you will hopefully understand. For a React newbie, this is probably hard. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? Because it is 4:20, and I'd say it's time for a short break. Like, I don't know, 8 to 10 minutes. Jonathan has a question. Let's see what it is. Yes, totally. And for complex and large sites, it totally makes sense to have a custom container that is called talk list. That would have a for example, you would be only allowed to add talks into that. You can do that by hand as well. You can say, well, actually not here. We should be, but I can't see it here. So you can constrain the edible types for that type, for that folder, or for that type. There's a behavior called constrain types. If that is enabled, you can decide as a manager which types are edible, and as a developer, you can also say, I have a new content type called talk folder or talk container, and the only thing that goes in there are talks. So that is absolutely okay. I'm not a huge fan of overdoing these. I often inherit projects where there's like a people folder, project folder, I don't know, department folder, and these are basically folders. Why not use folders? It makes it, doesn't make things a lot easier, but if you have many of these, and if it's, it can totally make sense. The only thing that annoys me about this chapter is that you have to register, and that's like you have backend and frontend, you have to keep both in the same in your mind. You have to register that view for the content type if you want to use that in React. We didn't do that for talks, because for talks, we had added a default view called view, and that's if you use in React, the content type views that are configured here, content types views here, talk, default views, this automatically maps view to the talk view in this case. It only makes a little sense the way that I explain that, but believe me, that's approximately the way it works. So we didn't have to do that here. But for folders where a little different approach is used, yeah, here layout views, we have to register that. And if you have multiple views for one content type, then the default view wouldn't work. If we would have set the default view for folders, then we couldn't have a normal folder. They would all have the default view would then be the talk list view. That would be weird and annoying. Any other questions? None so far. Think of more questions. I'll answer them after the break. The next 2 chapters are super relaxing because I'm not going to do any development. I'm going to explain stuff and show stuff a little. So feel free to use the break to catch up with the code, copy and paste your package to the state that you want that to, or just get a coffee like I will do. See you in 5 minutes, and thank you so far. Okay, I'm back. After the training, or at the end of the training, I want to take half an hour to do questions and answers, but not only regarding the training, also regarding general Plone development questions. So what you can, I dare you to think about questions like, you have this and that requirement, use case, business scenario. How would you solve that the easiest way in Plone? What would be a good approach to do that? If you could think of any of questions along that line or any other questions, that would be great. So please yell at me at least at 6:30, so I don't don't forget to do that, because I'm too enthusiastic about the topics we're just talking about. So let's move on. The next chapter is about programming Plone, basically. So there is something that you as a developer should definitely know about and that you should read up on. It is called Plone API, and I'm not talking about the Plone REST API. You should read about that as well, certainly, but the Plone API, it is a Python package that makes a back-end developer's life much easier, because it has the 20% that you do 80% of the time in it. A couple of examples. For example, there is a method called to create content. It's called, you always import it from Plone, import API, and say api.content.create, and you say, okay, what type you want to create, where you want it to create, and what title it should have. We're going to use this in the training later to generate content, and it's a nice way to easily create content on the site. It does all the checks for like, can you actually add this type of content in that folder and stuff like that. There are a couple of alternative methods, obviously, to create content. And when you're a JavaScript developer, you can use the REST API, obviously, to create content. It has a put method, endpoint, where you do a put call and it creates content for you. But this is the backend developer's approach in this case. Another example, stuff that is sometimes really hard to do, is sending emails. In Plone, it is super simple. API portal.send email, recipient, sender, subject, body, bam, you're done. It takes care of everything else for you. Another example is, so you're dealing with different users, and they have different permissions and roles, and you have to find out what is that user in such and such a role, or you grant you permissions or grant roles. You can do all of that with the Plone API. So it's like the core package for daily programming tasks. Everything that is not in the Plone API is a bit harder, and you need more experience with Plone, but if you know how to work with the Plone API, you can already do a lot of things, and I'll show you some examples afterwards. Plone has more than that, obviously. It has a lot of tools, and we already saw some of these. One tool that we already saw was the portal catalog, and we actually used the really old school SOAP interface to inspect an index or rebuild an index in the portal catalog. You could also create an index in that user interface, and this is a visual representation of a Python module, or an object. In this case, the instance is the portal catalog, and they are available as a developer, and you can do stuff that is not possible in Plone API because you don't need them that often. The Plone API is basically a wrapper for methods that are also provided by these tools, or mostly provided by these tools, including there is a method called in content find, API content find, and you say where you want to find stuff and what you want to find. For example, you want to find everything where the portal type is talk and featured equals true, and it will return the results from that catalog search. But there are methods that are not used these 80% of the times, including unrestricted search results, which will return all results disregarding their permission status and stuff like that. In the backend, you are allowed to do that, obviously. In the front end, you can't. You can't say unrestricted search and it gives you everything. This will be a breach of security. So this doesn't happen unless you break security yourself and write a method that does that. You can totally do that. I suggest you don't. This one is actually outdated, but still, it still exists in 5.2. In Plone 6, it will be gone. Still, so there are a couple examples here, and we're going to see interesting things later. And so this is these are a couple approaches in code how to deal with content from the Python point of view. If you're a Python developer, you have to spend a lot of time of your life debugging and figuring out what is happening. And Plone has a couple of really interesting and good tools to help you with. The most important ones are not from Plone itself, but from Python. Obviously, the tracebacks, same as React. Python has a lot of tracebacks. You should learn how to read these tracebacks. The most important thing is not, I don't know, studying tracebacks, but getting used to reading them and taking the time to actually read them. More often than I care to admit, it happens to me that like before with a React traceback, I saw the traceback and said, no idea what's going on there. Because I didn't take it should have taken me 5 seconds at the most to actually read the title of the traceback, because it was there like clear as day. Item audience is null. Like there we have your result. That was JavaScript, okay, but in Python it's the same. Please take your time. You need to learn about PDB, the Python debugger. You should use PDB++. This is a topic for a totally different talk, a longer one. You are using PDB debug mode in this environment that you're using at the moment. I already showed that yesterday quickly when I'm gonna demo that again because it's just so exciting and amazing. Look at that talk. So here's my schedule. You see, this view is nothing like the Volto view because we didn't write a view for the backend. We didn't write a Plone Classic view. There is a chapter about writing a view for Plone Classics for talks, and that has been in the training since like I can think, but we're doing Volto front-end development. But you can't trigger a PDB from the front end. You probably could if you wrote your own endpoint for that, but we didn't. But if you say PDB at the end here, or if a traceback appears because there's an error, you will end up in a PDB session here, and you can, you see it's actually a view that calls an exception, and self-context is the object that you're calling the URL/PDB on, and you can inspect that. As I said, they are a dictionary-like. Is a dictionary-like structure, and you can inspect them as a dictionary. So if you say self-context, it has a parent, so you can walk up and down that tree. Oh God, parent. Yeah. Talking and typing is not my strong suit at the same time. So this is the folder, and I showed that at the very beginning of the training. It has keys. That's the content. So let's look at the different talk that we could look at. Here is Volto is the thing. Sorry, I forgot the parent here. Parent. Volto is the thing. And you remember I said, well, you can do a lot of stuff here. You remember another, this is like I traverse through the tree. I access the content as if it's a nested dictionary, and we have content publishing. They're self-publishing. So if I my talk, whatever, or talk equals this object. So here I have this object. I can deal with that in Python in any way. If I call that, just call it. This is the HTML that I get returned. You can actually follow this. If you say, what is call? Call is a method, and you can actually inspect that method. This is PDB++. It is super amazing. If you do question mark, it shows you the code of the method that you're looking for, and then you can step in. In fact, it gets the layout, so it has a view, and then it finds the template, and then calls the template, and so on. So there's a whole thing that is happening there. It is just, Python is just so much fun. Okay, this is PDB debug mode. It just triggers the PDB. It is great to inspect whatever what you're dealing with and to find out what's going wrong. Never put that in production. You can't actually, because it's disabling itself when you run it as bin instance start. There are a couple more things. I already mentioned printing mail host. There's also Plone reload. So if you change Plone code, you can call reload on the Zope root and reload the code, and the Python code will be reloaded. This is super practical if you do. It's like hot reloading, but not hot since it doesn't happen on every save. There is an add-on that does that, but I'm not a huge fan of that personally. That's fine. Another thing that you really need to know about is Sentry. If you don't know about that, Google Sentry, check what it does. It is a online tool. It is open source, but it's also a service that you can use. It's built on Django, actually. It's a Python application. It is huge, and it collects your tracebacks, and it not only collects all the tracebacks that happen in your application. If you include it in your build out or in your whatever, you can use it for any kind of system, not only Python. You can use it for JavaScript applications, for Ruby, for whatnot. And it not only collects the traceback, but also the local variables for each state in your traceback. This is invaluable. If you are a developer at some point, you need that definitely. So we're not going to do this exercise because you don't know about browser views yet. I mentioned that already a little, because this is, when you're seeing that, this is the representation of a content, and it's actually a browser view. It's just the technical thing, how it's called. And you can write them yourself, and they are the Swiss Army knife of the Python backend developer or the Plone Classic developer. You don't use browser views that often if you use Volto as your front end, but they still come in handy when you, as an administrator or a developer, when you, for example, do migrations, move stuff around, write upgrade steps, and so on. And one example is here. It's the exercise. It's a browser view called demo content. If you register that, you can go to classic Plone. In this case, there's no REST API endpoint that I wrote for that. And this is what I wanted to show you. This is the code that would be called if you go to that URL. So this is just, it's a browser view, it calls, and this is calling this method. This is where it's getting interesting. Everything else is just boring. Create talks. Portal is the Plone site. See, API portal get. You can get the Plone root, the portal, anywhere in your code using API portal get. And then you can ignore this. there's a helper that we're using from the Plone view. We're getting random jokes from a external data source. There's a stupid source joke generator that returns you lots of jokes in a JSON format, and we're loading these. And then we're taking this JSON data that we're getting from the internet, and we're creating content from that. So the point here is I make use of Plone API to create content in my Plone site without having to edit that. This is an excellent example to fill your website with demo content. For example, if you have a project and the client wants to see, well, how the website will look like, you can't show them an empty website. You need some demo content, but you don't want to type that every time yourself. You write something like this called demo content, and it'll dump some content on your site, and you can show them. So this is how a joke would look like, for example. A talk in this case would look like. You can also publish content with the Plone API content transition to state published, and so on. There's a lot of explanation here. You should read up on that, what's happening here. It's really, really interesting. So if there are no questions about this, which I see, I mostly skip this part. It's not long anyway. The most important point, I think, got across without me saying anything. And that is, you need to know your editor, and you need to configure your editor in such a way that it boosts your productivity. Let me give you two examples. One is every editor or API, unless you use Notepad, has the feature to search through the whole code. And a good one also has the feature to search through the whole code of your project and look for methods and classes. So in Sublime, for example, if I press Command-Shift-R, I get a search, and I can say, I can look for create. And when I click on create, it shows me everywhere that create is used. And I'm looking for something in Plone API. So there is probably Plone and API in it. Yay. And PY, hopefully. No, not PY, because I'm not looking for a file. So it obviously finds too many JavaScript files in this case. I only wanted let's say, API content create. Let's see if I can find that. Not sure why I can't find it. Hang on. Super bad example. Okay, let's do something else. iForm field provider. I click on it. There's only one result. It automatically finds where it is. It also allows you to go to definition. If there's only one, it finds it. PyCharm can do the same. All the editors that are good. VS Code can do the same in JavaScript and in Python. And so you can jump around a code base that is huge. And Plone is huge. It has over 1 million lines of code. So you can't know all of that by heart. So you need to find out, okay, what is schema, what is provider, what does that do? You don't have to know all of that by heart, but your editor helps you to find that. And the same, this is one example. The other simple example is if you want to find a file, just search for that file, type the name, that's then content. Oh, I was looking for, did I search for content for create? So this is API content, and here I have the create method, and I can it shows me all the methods that are in there. So these are simple features that every editor has, and you should be able to use these to be a better developer. And the same is true for Visual Studio Code. It has really excellent search. You can find files, you can find methods. It has basically, it's even the same shortcuts because I told it to use Sublime type shortcuts, I think. So yeah, that's the whole point. the more time you invest in getting to know your editor, and on top of that, you also have to know Vim at least, or Emacs, because that's what you get when you log into a server, the more productive and the more happy you will be as a developer. Here are a couple of add-ons for Sublime, but they may already be outdated because I didn't maintain this page very well. I'm sorry about that. Okay, another thing. Oh, totally different thing, not another thing. Totally different thing. We wrote a search for talks, and we created a list from that. And you can argue about the design, but I think it works fine. It's lacking a couple of things that we'll add later, but we had to develop stuff. That is always hard. And I really like the approach where we didn't have to develop stuff, because we added a feature in the backend that allowed us to use the user interface to create the list, like these items that are featured or should be featured on the front page. And a custom search you can write these views as we did for schedule, and you will definitely write a lot of these in the future, but you could also use a couple of add-ons that are available in Plone. So far only in Plone Classic. There are add-ons that are being developed for Volto here, let's see, search here. There are, there's a Elasticsearch faceted. Let's see if we have that. Only not yet. So there are add-ons being developed that provide similar functionality, but in Plone itself, there are in Plone Classic, sorry, not Plone itself. In Plone Classic, there are a couple that are worth mentioning. One is EEA faceted navigation, because that would allow you to create a very complex search that is without programming anything. I'll just show you a project that I'm working on currently has this search for high pressure cleaners. So there are thousands of products, and you can filter them by type, like, I don't know, here, this is electric or stationary or which pressure class. And when you click, you see, did you see that? I hope you saw that. It changes the results. And yes, we put in some styling, but the search itself is generated from is generated through the web. There is a user interface that if you're an admin, you can go here, configure search, and you can say, okay, let's search. Oops, cancel that. Add these search options and already pre-filter by this and that. So this is a super powerful add-on, and I'm hugely grateful for Web, I think, for developing that, or the European Environment Agency for financing this excellent add-on that powers a lot of our sites and a lot of other sites. This is just one example where you don't have to develop anything. And there is a quick, a simpler add-on that's also really nice, collective collection filter, that does something similar, a bit more lightweight, but still all Plone Classic. So let's not spend too much time in there. So, but the point is, if programming is too hard, you should look for add-ons that fulfill or solve the task that you want to solve. And if you're unsure, just ask in the community forum, hey, I have this and that requirement. Can you recommend anything to do that? My project uses Plone this version. I use Volto, or I use Plone Classic, and I already have this and that add-on inside. And then people can tell you, oh, sorry, there's nothing, or yeah, there's something, but it's really outdated, or yeah, there's actually this thing. please try that, but there's also that thing, but that's not released yet, so you need a source checkout, but you should give it a go. Or I don't know, there's nothing for Volto yet, but it's in development, and ask me in 2 weeks. Then it's probably available to you. So this is a very important tip for you if you have requirements where you think this is going to be tough and you're not sure how to solve these. Ask the community for their advice how to solve that, and don't reinvent the wheel every time. Talking about reinventing the wheel, let's go to the next chapter, because the Plone conference, the organizing team on Mars is getting anxious because the conference is drawing near and they want to make up a schedule, like on what's happening when. They plan to move the party to Olympus Mons because like 50,000 people signed up for the conference. But and then they realized, oh my gosh, we forgot to add date and field to our talks, because our talks, we can sort them and put them somewhere, but we can't store the date when the talk is actually, or the day even, when the talk is happening on our talks. So that's a major fail. So the obvious solution would be to go into the Python schema of our talk and add at the bottom or somewhere, add a date field and a time field, and then we can select a date and time, and then we index that so it is actually searchable and sortable by the search endpoint of the REST API, and then we get this data in our view and we display that. And that would be absolutely okay, but it would be super stupid, because Plone already has all of that built in. So if you look at your add form menu, you have this event thingy here. And if you click on that, you see one of the content types that we haven't talked about yet. That's the conference party, for example. Let's add some content here. It will happen not in 2020, but in 2035, obviously. But let's say it is, I think it's on Thursday. The party is on Thursday, this Thursday, at 7 p.m., I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not on the 6th, but on the 10th. And it's obviously open end. Let's, I don't know, let's say open end and save, and we have an event. So we see a visualization, we see a date field. Wouldn't it be great to reuse what Plone already has? So in the chapter before, when we created the featured checkbox, hang on, I have to ask my daughter to maybe. Service announcement. Excellent. So yes, there is a way, because all of that is actually not part of the event schema, but it is a behavior. So there is a behavior of in Plone. It's in Plone up events, and we'll just make use of that by adding the event basic behavior. If we wouldn't know about that, we just look at this content type, see that, hopefully. We could miss that. Obviously, I miss things all the time. Not add-ons. Wrong. Dexterity content types. Go to the event. Check. Oh, that's a good thing. Let me show you something. Event schema. So you see all these fields are non-editable, and it doesn't show. So in Plone Classic, it shows which behavior it comes from. Sorry, this feature doesn't exist here, but still you can click on event and click on behaviors, and you see event attendees, event basic, event contact, event location, and event basic is the basic event schema. And this is obviously what we want. And we could go to our talk and simply enable that event basic behavior, click and done. But we want to do that repeatable. And thank you for the purge thingy. I would have forgotten about that. I need to put that in the code as well. So the name is event basic. Just add that here, save the file and reinstall the package. Let's do that. Site setup, add-ons, conf, click and click. And schedule, and Volto is the thing, and edit, and voila, there it is. Event starts, event ends, whole day, open end. So obviously you already found out what open end is for. It's for the party, for example. Whole day is, for example, the sprints. They don't really start or end, they just go on forever. So now we can add that and say, okay, this talk is on Tuesday, no, on Wednesday. Yeah, Tuesday. It's interesting. I always irritated by the American Sunday as the first date of the first day of the week, but never mind. Save. It doesn't show up yet. So yeah, that's the next task. So the conference party has this here. So we did all that. That's fine. Oh, I forgot that. Ignore that. So how do you find out what that is? Yesterday, I already showed you a tool that is available in your browser where you can inspect React components. And everything you see there is in one way or another a React component. So why not look at that and figure out which component that is. So this is the DOM. I could also just look at the DOM and see, okay, there's a right floated segment thingy. And I need to, I could check my code for dividing subheader, but the problem is that in React, you don't write raw HTML with like a div class UI dividing subheader. This doesn't exist because we're using semantic UI to orchestrate this page. And the code would look different than that. For example, it wouldn't say class equals, it will say CSS class equals. And it would probably not have the UI because the UI is auto-generated by semantic UI. So what we really should look for is the React developer toolbar and try to inspect this element here. And when we click on that, we see a segment. So the container has a segment and a header, and then there's a content, and that is called when. And when is the component in this case. So there's some more information, but the most important thing is the source is from the event view JSX. So it's obviously used. The when component is either defined or used in event view JSX. So let's keep that in mind and look for when and for event view in our code. And it comes in handy if your editor allows you to look for components. Let's see. Oh, there already, if I look for when, I find something. I find two things. The build, I don't want the build. That's the final thing. Event dates info JSX, that obviously has a when component. You can see that it's a component because it has exactly the same name. So this is the when component. It's part of Volto. So you see omelette, src, components, theme, view, event dates info. Okay, but this doesn't really compute, maybe, if you're not a React developer yet. So I'd be more interested in finding out how to use the when component. So let's look at the file, the event view JSX, where my React developer toolbar tells me that this component is actually used. So event view JSX, let's find that file. That's Command T for finding a file. So here's my event view. And there, the when component should be used, I guess. So here, import when from, that's good. That's exactly what we want. And then these are the props. These are unimportant. Here is my when component. So this is actually what I want. So, okay, let's just copy and paste that into our talk view for now. And then we'll get an error message, obviously, because let's put that above the description, because the import, I didn't copy the import. So where was my event view? God, I should have opened that properly here. So that's my when component. And here is my import. Let's copy and paste that into my talk view. Just put that here. We're not using the recurrence, so just use the when thingy. That should be enough. So, okay, it is here. It says content, start, content, end, content, whole day, content, open, end. These are the 4 fields that were available in our schema. So I'm guessing, since I'm looking at the object, that this data is actually available, and the naming is also correct because I use content here. I could also say my content object is called, I don't know, buttercream sandwich. And then I would have to use this, name here. But it's a good convention to call it content because that's the content. In Python, it would be the context or self-context if it's the view. So I guess this should work. We're probably still seeing a traceback before. Here, we got it. So why is this important? We could just go ahead and say content.start, but you remember the mess we had to deal with moment. It's not a mess with the created date. But here you have so many options. You have a full day. You have from to or multiple days, because here it says December 8 from 5 to 6. Imagine it is December. If you would write it yourself, you would certainly end up as the first iteration as December 8, 2020 from 5 p.m. to December 8, 2020, 6 p.m. And so I guess you get the point that rendering dates in the right way, especially dates that can stretch multiple days or are open-end, or can use the full day. And if it's full day, you don't want December 8, 2020 from 0 o'clock to 11 p.m. 59. That would be super stupid as well. You want that rendered in a different way. So please don't do that yourself. It takes a lot of your time that you don't have to, and don't have to spend, and just reuse what Plone gives you. So here we have a date and it looks fine. It's perfect. It's exactly what we want. And we have that for all of our talks now. So now the only thing that we still have to do. So the whole thing here is is explained in the training. We will improve the styling somewhat, because I'm not super happy with it being here. This looks like metadata, like the date and the audience and maybe the room, but there's no room. Oh God, we forgot the room. We need a room field as well. Let's add that. No, let's not add that now. Let's add that later. Let's put this, like, really these bits of information that you need as an editor, as a user of that site, in a nice place. No, don't go to the talk. Yes, I should close the other ones. Save. Let's hope that hot reloading works fine this time, and yay. So, okay, this might not win a prize for style, because these look a bit skewed, but still, fine. I have the date and I have an audience, and the changes that I did are not that big. I just created a new segment that was floated right. So I didn't write a single line of CSS for that. It just floats right because I use the segment from Semantic UI, check the user interface. Jonathan, good question. Good question. I hope there's going to be a universal time, like start date. We should all switch to start date. Then it's like no questions. Let's meet at start date, whatever, something. So there's a segment header, which makes it show up a bit bigger and has this nice underline. So it's a separator. It's a header with a dividing subline. And then there's the when component, and we already also moved the audience in there. We have this iteration over the audience in this place. What else did we do? We didn't do any other changes. Everything else is still the same. So this is our updated talk view now. It looks like this. Oh, this is a like next chapter thing. I have to update this this screenshot, obviously. There's a nice, well, there's a thing now. You have been easily copying paragraphs data. Is that a feature of your editor or something else? Not getting the question. Paragraph data, you mean like I double click and do this? I just select the whole lines. Yeah. Or, yeah. I guess, and the formatting so that it looks nicely indented, that's automatically done by VS Code. I have a couple of here, ESLint, no, and Prettier, that's Prettier in this case. Prettier is enabled, so it renders nicely. Armin, please. There is so the story of the website, and we haven't gotten to that yet, is that speakers submit their talks themselves. So at a later chapter, we're not getting there in this training, not today. It would be probably Tuesday if we kept going. We enable self-registration and create a custom workflow that allows authenticated users to create talks in a certain folder and submit them for review by the organization committee. And so the problem here is, or it's not a huge problem, you could just ignore that, but the issue is you would get a lot of emails if people submit their talks and they can already select at which date and time that is. So you would get stupid emails. There's an easy fix for that, where you can say simply in CSS, because it's not secret data. Anyway, it's not, you can just use CSS to say, okay, if your user role is contributor, don't display these fields. And if your user role is reviewer, then please show them again. So the one hides it and the other because it's afterwards, overrides the setting before if you have both roles. That's a simple hack. You could also go to the schema and set field permissions. Say you need this and that role or permission to modify or actually set that field at all. The problem is here, this is not our schema. We're using a behavior, and actually overriding, adding field permissions to fields that are from a behavior from Plone, a core behavior, has unintended consequences, because then the same would apply to all events content that you add in your site. So you probably don't want that. And also it's a really ugly hack that you don't want to know about. So if you really need hard permissions on your schema, put them in your own schema and don't hack into a existing behavior field. There are a couple of things that are easy to change, but I'm not going to go into that. That's like advanced dexterity stuff. So now we need to adapt talk list view to handle the date and time. I'm going to skip the exercise. Wow. Oh, that's a to-do. Very nice. Okay, let's not do that since it's a to-do. It's for the future. It would be nice to show up so you have a schedule, and the schedule should actually be a schedule. I gave a talk this spring. It's called Your First Volto, Your First Plone 6 project, where I used the how's it called? The full calendar component. There's a React component that uses the by full calendar. Full calendar itself is a React component now. It's a JavaScript library. You can include that in Volto as a dependency, and you give it the talks, and you can see the talks in a beautiful calendar view. I suggest you watch that video. It's available on YouTube. I think I added a link to our company website if you're interested in that. So that would be like even better. Okay, there's another question. In Macros in general, triple clicks. Yeah. That's true, triple clicks, excellent. Next. Oh, God, this is gonna be good. So it is 5:20. Can you give me a sign if you need a break? Do you need a break, or should we do 15 more minutes in this next chapter? Anyone in the chat or the other chat? There is
no break.
No break. Never break. Okay, let's power on. 15 more is fine. Thank you. Okay. Oh, the you mean the lorem ipsum thing? That's a add-on. It's called. How's it called? Little ipsum. Little ipsum. Little ipsum. There's plenty of little add-ons that do that. That's little ipsum. I like it. It's okay. There are probably better ones. So next, we just realized that we have a lot of excellent information here, but you know when to be, and you know which planet to be on, probably, but you don't know where exactly on that planet you can be. So which room? So we could just add, go to our schema, the talk schema, and say, let's add a room field here, room equals choice field, and pick one of 3 or 4 available rooms, and that's good. But like next year on, I don't know, Venus, maybe it's a bit too hot there, I'm not sure, Alpha Centauri somewhere, there's the next conference, and the rooms will certainly not have the same numbers or names. because yes, the audience might be the same and the types of talk might be the same, but the rooms certainly won't. So next year you will have to go to your code and change that. And for a Plone conference, that's probably okay, because there's actually, even at this one, there's not 50,000 people attending and we don't have 5,000 talks. But still, it is annoying because we want our code to be reusable for other conferences as well. So we need a way to have the available rooms editable by editors or by managers. So there are several solutions to that. One is obviously to use something like the tagging. Is if you go to categorization, you can add a tag like room 12, and there you have your room, and you can add it yourself, and you can even, it searches for these. And in the next talk, you can actually have you can select these. So that will be a perfect. You have room 12, or you say auditorium, whatever, a new tag. That is fine. But the task here is a bit more complex, because we imagine that this is, we have a hierarchical system where the selectable types, rooms should only be managed by a manager and not by a normal editor or contributor. It's a little far-fetched, but it is something that you will, and in this case, because you absolutely could use the subject field or something like the subject field, so you wouldn't have to jump through all these hoops that we're jumping through next. But in your next projects, you will absolutely, I'm certain you will encounter is exactly that use case, that you have a fixed set of values that you have to be able to choose from, and these sets of values should not change unless something specific happens and some external data source demands from you that you change your data. Okay, so for this we will change our list or set field. I think it's a set with choice as a value type, and our choice fields to use vocabularies. And we will create a control panel that is accessible to editors to manage these settings for Plone Conference. And we will add these, we will store these settings in the registry. You already encountered the registry when we added the query string. And then you can finally assign talks to the prospective rooms. So that's, there's a lot there, but the end result is definitely worth it. So I'm not going to do the whole chapter before the break. Let's do 5 more minutes before the break, let's say. So there is the registry. It is excellent. It's amazing. It stores all configuration that you use in Plone. Even most of the, let's say, almost everything that is in here imported through generic setup ends up in the registry in one way or another. But it has its own user interface that is at the moment only available in classic Plone. You can go to it and see all the configuration settings in a user interface here, configuration registry. There is no UI in Volto for that yet. And you can, for example, look for, let's say, displayed type, or let's say displayed, let's search for displayed. There should be some Plone displayed types, and you've seen that before. You just seen a slightly different user interface. So the Plone control panel here has a slightly different user interface to allow you to manage these settings, but the data is stored in the portal registry. And this is how like the raw user interface looks like. That is fine. But we want additional additional comfort. So we're gonna add more. So there are registry records, and one, we already saw this displayed types record. You already added a query string record. That's also in the registry. There's like tons and tons of stuff. You can modify these in Python. It's described here how you do that. It's a great idea to do that in Python in an upgrade step or in a setup handler that is code that is run when you're installing a package. We're going to get to that in the next chapter. And the way that in our case, we want a list of options that are possible rooms that you can choose from. So you saw how you created your content type, how you created your behavior, and a configuration data is created in exactly the same way. So you will write another schema. We'll use two fields, is talk submission open or closed. So that's a Boolean field, obviously, and which rooms are available for talks. So we could also at the same time add values for types of talk and for audiences, since maybe that will allow us to add lightning talks on the fly without having to change our code and redeploy our application while the conference is running because the organizers totally forgot about lightning talks. Stuff like that actually happens. So there you create a new file called controlpanel.py. You can add that any way you like. Actually, the idea to have it in browser was very valid when it came for classic Plone. Nowadays, I would probably put it in the root of the package. But let's stay with the documentation here. Create a file in browser control panel. We haven't used the folder browser at all yet. The reason for that is the browser folder is it's a convention, the name browser. It's just a Python module like others. It has a configures.yml and an init.py, same as the behavior folder. The content folder has no configures.yml, but it's also a Python module. The browser folder is called browser because everything you put in there is visible in the browser. But since we're not writing the stuff that is visible in the browser in the backend, but in Volto in the front end, we haven't used the browser folder at all. In the Plone 5 training, we spend a lot of time in there. We're doing amazing things here. So let's keep with that and add a file called control panel. Controlpanel.py. And after I paste the schema and explain the schema, we're going to go on a break. It is really simple. It looks exactly, or almost exactly, like the content type or behavior schema. So you remember, here's our behavior featured, class I featured. The I is signals that it's an interface that defines the schema, or in talk, the talk schema, I talk. And in this case, I have a control panel and it says I PloneConf control panel. It is not model schema because we don't model content here. We just model data. That's a difference that you just need to, if you write your own control panel, you just go to the training, you copy and paste, you add the fields that you need, but then you don't have to memorize that, oh, this is not model schema, but interface. Obviously, actually, if you use model schema here, it won't change a thing. It'll still work because model schema is a subclass of interface. So it will still work. Actually, it will probably give you additional features that you could benefit from. I should actually look into that. So quickly through the schema, there's a Boolean field. Title description is not default, obviously. If you say for a Boolean field, you say default equals true, then you get a validation error if you don't check that. So talk submission always has to be open. So a Boolean field with required with required true is only useful for yes, I've read the contributor agreement, or yes, I've read the code of conduct and stuff like that. Types of talk is a list. We're setting a default now, but it allows us to store our different options. Same audiences, and here we have the room we're actually working on. Rooms, available rooms for the conference. It's a tuple in this case, not a list, just for the fun of it. It's just because you can use these different Python data types. Tuple or a list is just, it wouldn't make a difference in this case, which ones one to choose. Available rooms, and here are the defaults that are available, and yeah, now you can edit that. So with this done, we'll take a short break, and we'll go on for another 45 minutes until the end of this chapter. Then we'll call it quits, and say and take half an hour for question and answers, and hopefully some feedback from you, because we'd really like to find out what we can improve about the training. And maybe you have some some use cases where you want to figure out how to actually solve or approach that in Plone. That would be a great option, discussion afterwards. And yeah, okay. If you can think of any additional questions up to here, please put them in the Slack channel, and I'll see you in let's say something like 8 minutes. All right, see you then. Okay, after some oxygen influx, I think we can continue. So the task at hand, I saw in the chat, I saw a question, Kleber Santos asked, with Volto, no more ZMI customizations of views, scripts, Python, and other using Plone. You can still do that, but they won't have any effect in Volto, but you can do customize, as you saw with the portal catalog or portal types, for example. It definitely has an effect if you change the data, but everything that is visualization, like viewlets, views, templates, portlets, whatnot, they are not used by Volto at all, so they won't have any effect. I would love to see something similar for Volto, where you click on the user interface and it shows you which component it is, and you click another button and it actually customizes, creates a copy of that component in your Volto package, and then you can go in there and change the code, maybe even in the browser as well. That is totally doable in React, I think, but certainly not by me, I'd say. So, yeah. Good, let's keep going. But there are amazing React developers in the community, and they do crazy stuff. So I don't think that is totally out of the scope, what I was just dreaming about. Okay, so this is the schema. Yeah, we talked about the schema. It is really straightforward. Nothing fancy to see here. The point is that we're not using that to create content. So Plone wouldn't know, okay, when should I render that and where should I store the data? Plone has, yeah, it's an interface. Good, good for you. Still, nothing. Plone is not doing anything with it unless you tell it to. And the way to tell it to store the data that you set there in the registry is by registering that as a control, as a record in the registry, not as a control panel yet. It's just called control panel because the Python module is called like that. So you go to your backend code. This is most of that is everything here is happening in the backend, even though it has very interesting consequences in the front end. You go to your profiles folder, go to the default profile. It's just a convention, the name, by the way. When you install a package, Plone looks for a profile that is called default, that is registered here. It's automatically registered when you create a package from the package generator with Plone CLI. It creates a profile called default with the name of your package and stuff like that. So this is the default package. There's also an uninstall profile that runs when you uninstall the package. So you get rid of, in this case, only a browser layer, which is not important. Uninstalling packages is something you should learn about at some point, because it's really annoying if you have projects that have add-ons installed that you can't properly uninstall, and you'll have to remove all that stuff yourself. I gave talks and wrote documentation on that, plenty, let's say. So there is a folder called registry in your default profile, and in the main XML, it's still empty, there's nothing in it. You can copy and paste this piece of code here. This is just styling the indentation. XML doesn't care, but my eyes do. And you register records for the interface, and you see what that is. This is a Python path. It's an absolute Python path. Making that a relative Python path would be really hard, because I don't know at which what's the context where it is read. So yeah, actually how many dots would you need to find the right relative path, and you add a prefix. That is very convenient, and you'll see that soon. And so this, when you reinstall your package, this will tell the Plone, the portal registry, to look for this schema in this Python path and generate records from the data that is defined in this schema. So here is your control panel schema. So let's do this. I have to restart my backend because I added control panel.py. Python doesn't know about new files automatically. There may probably some way to do that. Maybe Plone Reload does that. I haven't tried, but it's a good practice to, if you add a new file, Python file or ZZML file or JSX file, then you restart, in this case, the backend. So now let's reinstall our package once again. Getting tedious, but you should learn how to prevent that. There is a technology covered in the next chapter. Click on install again, and you don't see anything here now because the as I said, the portal registry user interface is not yet available in Volto, but in classic Plone, you can make sure that your values are actually registered by going to the configuration registry. You could also check your the log from the import, but it doesn't say which interface is added there. It's automatically reloading the registry. But here you can check for the prefix, and the prefix in this case, or check for the, just search. So what was one of our fields? Let's say talk submission open, filter. Let's see if something happens. Yes, it is there. Ploneconf.talk submission open is a Boolean, and the value by default is false. So by default, the talk submission is not open, and we could decide that this is enough. This could be absolutely enough, because we can now change all these settings. We can go to audiences, just search for audiences. There is a record in the registry. It is beginner, advanced, professional. If we click on that, we get a user interface where we can add something new or change it. Imagine you're writing this, this package not for you yourself as an organizer of the conference, but for a client, and they are not these super IT guys. So something like this user interface wouldn't fly. So you want something more fancy, something like this here, where you have a user interface that is explaining what it does. You have these options and so on. So that's what you want to go for. So you can now use these new settings in Plone, in Python. Say API portal, get registry record, talk submission open. In this case, it would be false because it's not open yet. And you can do that in XML as well, but we'll skip that. So now we'll add a lot of boilerplate around or to our interface, to our schema. And you don't have to memorize that, just copy and paste that, because I'm not going through that, all of that. That would take too much time. Just update the imports here. Bam. And at the, oops, at the bottom, there is this. I'll quickly explain what it does, but it's just definitely not something you need to memorize because it's just annoying boilerplate. And there's also, you need to register these two classes that you just added here in configure ZZML. You remember in browser directory, there's the control panel, you add some stuff here and you register it with the component registry here. Just copy and paste. what you do in your projects is you adapt the names and the Python path. So this is again a relative Python path. So if no matter what your package name is, this would still work. But if your if the view that's in there is not called Plone conf control panel view, it will obviously fail, and you can give it a different name. The important thing here is that the name of this browser page thingy and the name of this adapter need to be the same to work in Volto and in Plone and Plone Classic. So let's make that an absolute link to an absolute Python path. I prefer that. So you see, these are the two Python thingies you added to the control panel. So this here makes sure that the control panel can be rendered in Plone Classic. And this, annoyingly, is necessary to be able to render the control panel in Volto. Just copy and paste that and adapt the schema prefix should be the same. The label is only needed here. It's the same as the title here. General should always be the same. So there's not a lot that you need to change and not a lot that you need to know about that. You just use that as a pattern. I could explain everything that it does, but there's a lot of code that puts these tiny pieces together and checks if this is available and in the same in the same category as that, and if the names match, then yeah, bam, you get the REST API returns a additional control panel, and you can render that. So this is the registration for that. To add insult to injury, you also need to register the control panel, not only for the component architecture, which says, yeah, there is something probably there, but also for generic setup that will tell that, yes, please really add it here. And same with the view for the folder. Volto checks the, and there's another tool in Plone called the Portal Control Panel tool, asks the Portal Control Panel, hey, do you have a Portal Control Panel registered in your tool for this and that? And if it says no, it won't show up in Volto. So yeah, you need to register them for the backend and the front end, which is good because as an admin and a developer, you will, even if you're only writing React and you don't really know that much about Python, you will still need to spend some time in the backend to configure, to create your Plone site, to maybe rebuild the catalog, pack your database, I don't know, or whatnot. There's a lot of stuff where you still need access to that. Your users and your editors and maybe even your site manager, site admins don't need that, but as the developer and the real admin, you definitely need that. So add a new file, control panel XML, in your default profile that is in registry. No, not in registry. This is not, these are not stored in the registry, they are stored in the tool, in the portal control panel. So the you may be wondering why there are so many different approaches. Plone wasn't written last week. It has quite a lot of history, and the registry was actually only added in Plone 4. So before the registry was there, everything was stored in various Plone tools. There was a portal properties tool. It actually is still there, but we don't store anything there. And piece by piece, data was moved into the registry, but a lot of things are still, it's not worth putting in the time to change the storage layer for this configuration, because you'd also have to change the import, export handler and stuff like that. So this just stays the same. So you don't have to rewrite all the documentation as well. Good enough reason. So you add a control panel XML file here, new file in the default folder, not in registry. Control panel dot XML. Is it plural or singular? control panel, singular. Control panel, paste that here. And again, you have to reinstall. You could, I'm repeating myself here, you could just register it by hand. As I said, all of these tools have a user interface, and some of these user interfaces are not exposed to Plone Classic and not exposed to Volto, but are only in Zope. So this tool, Portal Control Panel, here are all control panels, zip, and here you can add a new control panel at the bottom. So what we're basically doing is we're filling out this form in XML and clicking submit, add by reinstalling the package, so that it is repeatable next year for the next conference. So we go to add-ons, again we do uninstall and install, and let's check in Classic Plone first, because now, as said, we're registering a control panel for Plone Classic and for Volto. Here's my PloneConf settings. I had to restart my instance because I forgot to, I did these changes after I restarted the previous time, and this is not this ZZML. The configuration for this is basically a browser view with the name PloneConf control panel. That's the URL I'm calling here. Is not available unless it's read on startup by Plone. So if I reload now after restarting, here's my control panel, and the same, hopefully, is true for Volto. Here is my control panel. And I can say allow talk submission. And I'm going to say, okay, the auditorium is, there's another room because we have so many people, is like a room XYZ, whatever. Add a new room and you save. And now when you go to schedule and your content type, what has changed? You guessed right. I don't know what you guessed, but if you guessed that, nothing, because A, there's no room field yet, and B, we haven't linked these options to these fields yet. So if I added a new type of talk, let's, where did I do that? Here, type of talk, let's add lightning talk. This will not show up here yet. So we need to update our schema to use a vocabulary. But sadly, we don't have a vocabulary yet. We only have a registry record. So what we need to do, and you might think that's annoying, but you will, believe me, you will use vocabularies a lot in your projects. We will need to dynamically create vocabularies that are registered by name. So you give that a name like the behavior or the UUID. The content has this UUID thingy. So the vocabulary also has a name. In this case, it's, for example, PloneConf rooms. You register a vocabulary. I'll do the code parts here. And then I'll explain the huge benefits that has. So create a vocabularies PY. This is not in browser because the convention says everything that shows it not in content, because we're not talking about content. This is like logic somehow. It doesn't show up in the browser. So the site root, the port package root is absolutely an acceptable place to add your vocabularies to, for example. And again, you have to register then for the component architecture in Django or other systems. You would probably add another decorator here saying add vocabulary brackets and give it a name, and it's auto registered. Plone doesn't have that feature. So here are my 3 vocabularies. And so we register it's called a utility with the name, here, let's talk about the rooms, PloneConf rooms, and it points to it's called a component. It's just a pattern. You don't have to understand the ZOP component architecture to use it. You just have to have a place where you can copy and paste the pattern from to be able to adapt it to your projects. Nobody expects you to understand everything that we're actually using here. So here's my Python path, the rooms vocabulary factory. So a factory is something that when you call it, it returns the factory. It's not the factory, it's not the vocabulary. It's not the vocabulary itself. So you have to call that. So here is my PloneConf rooms factory. So you call that, and you see something interesting here. It even has a context. So obviously you don't see that here, but when you use this vocabulary, it is instantiated with the context where it is used. So that opens a lot of possibilities. And also, what you also see, this is Python. So you can go here and say portal equals, oops, portal equals API portal get. So get your Plone portal. And from here, you can get whatever you want. Or you do a catalog query and you return a vocabulary of all available pages, news items, events that are in the future, for example. Do a search and return these and have them selectable in your content type. So in this case, we're using the API to simply get the registry records. This will return a list of strings with the names of the rooms. But a vocabulary is something more, and you already know why, because a vocabulary, you remember the issue we had in the talk view where we had to do this content dot type of talk dot title or content type of talk dot token. A vocabulary has three values, three items in it. One is the value that is actually stored on the object as an attribute when you select that. So object dot type of talk would be talk, for example. It has a token that is a string that is made safe to pass to the browser and back, so it doesn't get lost in Unicode and stuff. Special characters, spaces, you know what I'm talking about. And a title, which is the visual representation that is shown to the user when he has a multi-select or a choice field. So you can have a title that says only excellent talks, and the value is actually talk or talks. Much more important than this stupid example that I just made would be Vortrag, and the value being talk. Vortrag is the German word for talk. So you can use internationalization here and save the same value on the object in every language, but the option that is displayed to the user is the title. This is a basic HTML feature. For your select field, you have value and you have the content of your option tag. That's the thing that is displayed, and value is actually passed back to the backend when you submit that field. So this is where vocabularies come in very handy. Okay, lots of talk about vocabularies here. This is basically a short form version of what I just said, or a maybe longer one even. And now we have to restart our instance. We didn't change any XML, so we didn't register the vocabularies in generic setup. We only registered them for the component architecture, so they are read on startup and they are available. They can be looked up by name with the ZOP component get utility, and you say this is a vocabulary factory. And has a name such and such, and it will return you the vocabulary, and you can inspect the options that are in there. So far, so good. Now we have vocabularies. They have a name, but we're not using them yet. So we still need to change our schema to actually, instead of using types of talk schema, choice, values, whatever, something, just comment that out and say vocabulary equals, and well, you could write your vocabulary only in Python and then put the Python path here, call that, or import it here, the Python, the vocabulary, and just say, this is your vocabulary, call that, and it's the vocabulary, and you're done. But I like the way to the decoupling. So Plone is really, really good at decoupling things. So when your vocabulary only has a name, you can reuse that vocabulary in a different add-on without having to import code from that add-on in Python. So there's another feature that comes with this. You can, if you register something with a name, you can re-register that, the same name, and make your registration more important. There's a technology for that. You could use overrides or layers, stuff like that. So you can use a vocabulary that is provided by, say, core Plone or an add-on, and add your own version of that. This way to decouple things is extremely powerful when you create complex, big applications. And let's face it, Plone is not made for your bakery corner shop bakery, but for more complex websites. So it is called plone.conf.types, yeah, plural in this case, of talk. I always get confused when I create my vocabularies for my projects, how I should call them, if I should use plural or singular. In this case, I stuck to plural because the value in the registry is not type of talks, but it's a list, it's types of talks. So my vocabulary is also types of talk, even though the field is type of talk because I can only select one of these. And here I have audience and not audiences. So yeah, naming things is actually really, really hard. Now I can restart. And since I used the types of talk vocabulary, I hope I don't get an error because I forgot something or made a typo. You should see in Volto when we edit our talks. Let's pick one of the talks and turn that into a lightning talk. Ben, here you are. What's going to be? You should know React. We're not going to teach React, and that's going to be a lightning talk, let's say, because it's just, you should know that. Here we have it. We're done. Excellent. We have a lightning talk, and we save. And since we used the code, it's not hard coded to say type of talk is lightning talk, then display something. We're just displaying that here. If we add a new audience to our, let's finish the story. So we use vocabularies everywhere. Let's do that here for audiences as well. Before we, so in it's a choice, and that's the crap, the whole line. That was because it was shorter. That was why I replaced that. So value type of the set is choice. So you get the select field, and the vocabulary is PloneConf audiences, and add a new room called field called room. Ignore the directives widget. It's no use in Volto anyway. Thingy. So here's my room. And it's a set, choice is rooms. So save, restart, and after a second, yeah, while sharing a screen, the laptop is strained. So starting up Plone is usually faster, but it's okay. It's good enough. So here should be my room. So I can use one of these rooms, say auditorium, because all the lightning talks are given for the full audience. And the audience is obviously not professional, but everyone, but still, let's leave it like it is. What's missing? The talk. We're not the room. We're not seeing the room. Okay, tiny thing we almost forgot. We have to also change the front end to actually show the room. We see everything else, so we see the new type of talk, but we should show the room as well. We use the exact same pattern as before. Just use a different editor. Here's my talk. And let's add that below the date. So when, and then where, and then for whom. Save. So we again use a header with a dividing sub. Again, you see, so here is, you need the, already forgot what it's called. You need one HTML tag that surrounds the whole thing, but we have two here, so header and content. That's why we need this fragment. I think it's called fragment. This shorthand for basically nothing, so that it's still valid in React. And we don't have to restart anything. It'll just show up. Interestingly enough, we didn't select a room. Obviously, I forgot to save. Where's my room? No, auditorium is there. No options. Because this is, what's going on here? This is interesting. Why don't I have any options? We just had the options, didn't we? Did I undo anything? Room set, room required false. It worked before, and come on, edit. There's only one option. That is so weird. Okay, let's inspect that in the React Developer Toolbar. I think it might show up if we do a hard reload, but let's just imagine that we're not. So the talk view has the content, and the content has all the data. So we're looking for room. Let's see what it is. Room. It has one value. Auditorium. Why is it a list? It shouldn't be a list. It's an array. It shouldn't be an array. Maybe oh, this is stupid. It can't be in two rooms. So it needs to be a choice field. Oh, that's an interesting bug. Why did I hope I didn't add this error in the code, but it's obviously in the documentation. So unless you stream that to a different room, you can't have that in the same room. So in this case, it really helped to inspect the object in React. We could have done the same in Python and checked for the object, and it would have returned a set of strings and would say, well, it should be a set. So here, schema choice, room, vocabulary. So you only have one room to choose from. Let's restart the backend because we're changing the Python file here, the schema. So now we have to hope that we didn't ruin our data so that we have invalid data in our objects. And because then we'd have to switch to the next, yay, excellent, unhashable type set. So perfect. This is an excellent example because here we have a traceback because we stored, we have a set in a field that expects something different. It expects a string. So we get an error message, and we actually have we can't fix this through the web. We actually have to go to the schedule, and I'll just quickly fix that in Python just to show you that we can. So self context. Oh, here again. So copy of Volto is the thing, PDB. Self context. Room is a set. So sets are written with the curly brackets. Looks like a dictionary, but it's not. And we just say it is none. Or we could just set the value, the right value. Then we have to change it. If we say continue, it will not store this data because we didn't write to the database. So yeah, I'll have to do that again and just set the data and import transaction. You usually you only have to do that if you're in a PDB. When you're developing and you have a browser view, an upgrade step, any code, an event handler, what you write in Python, the transaction is done automatically at the end of the request. But this view is not committing automatically. So transaction.commit. You see, I use tab. It's good to configure your terminal in such a way that it works well. So this should now have valid data, and my React user interface should not complain anymore. And well, it looks terrible, maybe because just a reloading thingy. So here's my auditorium, and that's good. We're done. It shows up here. It's perfect. So here's the complete view. I hope no, it's a schema issue. I had a bug in the schema. So this something I have to tell you. There's a problem when you have changing data. Because your objects will not be updated. If you need that, while your project is running, your values, your options are changing, and you have existing values that need to be changed to something else, then you need to either write an upgrade step that goes through all the talks and changes if audience room equals that, then audience room equals that. Set it to something else and save the changes, or you use a different add-on. It's called collective taxonomy, and it's excellent. The downside is it has no Volto user interface yet, even though the user interface is actually written in React, but it's it's a small React application in Plone Classic, but it works perfectly in Volto as well. So the final result works in Volto because you can register your vocabularies manually, and you can change, you can add and change values, options. And so if you change the title of the value stays the same. That's a benefit. You could also basically change the logic in the here in the schema to say you have value and title, pair of values and titles that you make available by using a schema as a dict, for example, or some other dict is probably the right field for that, even though the user interface totally sucks, but it should work. Then you can change the title, construct the vocabulary in a slightly different way than, where's our vocabularies? Hang on. Than this, so you only get the title from the title, the value, and the key is the the value then. So that would work as well. But as I said, collective taxonomy will take care of all of that for you. And on top of that, it allows you to translate these. So you have a user interface and say, oh, this is the English, and this is the Spanish, and this is French, and this is whatever. And you can have someone translate the different options, and the values that are stored on the objects itself will stay the same. So this is an excellent choice for this use case. But still, even though you will definitely use vocabularies, you will definitely use dynamic vocabularies, and it will allow you to create complex and dynamic applications. And you will certainly write your control panels because your clients are lazy and they want a nice user interface. So it is a nice pattern to combine these three technologies: the registry to store the values, the control panel to be able to edit them in a nice way in the back end and in the front end, and the vocabularies to be able to choose from that. There is a lot of documentation, and something I forgot about is to say Plone has a lot of vocabularies already built in. For example, named vocabularies. Plone app vocabularies users. Use that, and you can select all the registered users in your Plone site. Plone app vocabularies portal types. You have all the portal types. There is definitely a use case for that, and so on and so forth. They're all listed in Plone app. Nope, they're not listed here. They're all listed in Plone app vocabularies. And that's where you can find the vocabularies that come with the core of Plone, and add-ons usually bring their own bunch of vocabularies with them. And it's easy to write them yourself. There's good documentation about various approaches of writing vocabularies in the Plone docs if you want even more than what you have here. This is a really simple example. Okay. It's 1824, which is actually pretty good timing, surprisingly, because this marks the end of this very fast preview of the Mastering Plone training. And before we go to the question and answer part, let me give you a short information about what you missed and what is still coming. So the next chapter, I already mentioned that a couple of times, that when your requirements and your data changes, you'd have to change that, and you have to reinstall your package, and that becomes annoying. And if you tell your client, yeah, you have to uninstall and reinstall the package, that is not inspiring confidence for good reason. So instead, you should write an upgrade step, and an upgrade step is basically something you register to get from version X to Y, and run Python code while it's doing that. So here is an upgrade step that is registered, and it's actually creating the setup for the site if it doesn't exist yet. So if you forgot a folder to add for example, the location folder where you get tourist information about Mars, where to get the best burritos, for example, this will create that folder and document for you. And it will also, because you started messing around with talks and adding them there and here and all over the place, it would go through the whole portal and find all the talks and move them in one place so that they're nicely cleaned up. In your client projects, you will certainly, when you have editors and they're allowed to add everything everywhere, they will do that. And you will have a mess of a content structure. And writing something like that is like, for example, take all the news items starting from 2004 to this year and move them all in the news folder or news archives, and remove everything that is older than 4 years. For example, this is code that you can use regularly in your projects. So this is an upgrade step, and there's a lot of stuff. There are more indexes that are added here. Then we're doing some testing in Volto because that is actually fun in Cypress. Then next, we're using, as I said, I repeated that, don't reinvent the wheel. If you have a requirement, there's probably an add-on that does that. So there's a couple, here is an example where you use a banner behavior to display a banner. That only works in Plone Classic. But we use this collective behavior banner basically in all of our Plone Classic projects because it is very flexible. Then a conference needs sponsors, and it's another content type. It has an interesting schema. It has some nifty tricks. For example, it has a secret field that is only visible to admins. So if you're an editor, the financial details of why this company is a sponsor are not your concern, because probably you have a deal. They are buying all the food, and this is why they get this and that sponsoring level, even though they're not paying the full price and stuff like that. Companies always want special deals, and totally makes sense. Then we want to display these sponsors, but not as a listing, but they should be visible on all pages in a special component in the footer. So we're extending the footer to show the sponsors, and the ones that pay more should be on top, and so on and so forth. So this is a nice nice React component we're writing here. We're using not the search endpoint in this case, but the query string component endpoint. You remember you added a new criterion for the query string, for query strings to be used in the listing block. This is also an endpoint that can be used as an alternative to the search endpoint in certain cases. This is all discussed and done here. And then we're using Volto add-ons because Volto has a lot of add-ons already. Then we're extending the rich text editor of Volto with additional features. We're adding our own block type, so that when you use the Pastanaga editor, you not only have the blocks that you're seeing here on the front page, but you register a custom block that shows up here when you select that. And this block will be a FAQ block type in the end, so that you have like question answer sets. So it has a nice user interface, question answer, next question answer, next question answer, and so forth. So that's really nice. Then you create a folder where speakers can submit their talks. Then we're dealing with relations, which is super exciting. So items can have relations to each other. I'm not talking about links, talking about relations. They can manifest as links, but they are much more powerful. And basically, if you've worked with relations before and don't know that, I'm going to give a lightning talk about that, but you should already keep in mind, where is it? Hang on. Collective relation helpers. Whenever you work with relations, like add them, edit them, delete them, display them, whatever, search for them, use collective relation helpers, because that is a really nice API. And there is a clip to move that into the Plone API, but I haven't gotten around to actually writing that. It's basically moving that code into Plone API and more documentation and tests and stuff, but I haven't finished that. Yeah, and so on and so forth. Also, if the trainers, Katja and me, and not only Katja and me, but many others who gave the Mastering Plone training in the past, are available to hire for trainings, in-house or online. So if you want in-depth in-house training, or you want to organize a bigger group, feel free to contact us. just put something on community.plone.org. This is not a business. It's not it obviously costs something to hire us for trainings, but we are usually mostly developers, so we're doing projects. I'm not a professional trainer I'm not making my living from doing trainings. This is more fun than business. Also, before we go to question and answers, God, so little time, so much to say. If you are new to the Plone community, if this is your first Plone conference, or even if it is not, but you are not part of the, or you don't think you're part of the Plone community, you're wrong, because whenever you do something with Plone, you are automatically absorbed by the Plone community. And the Plone community is really very welcoming and very helpful. Just if you have a question, go to community.plone.org and ask away. Sometimes it may take a while to get an answer, but there are a lot of very helpful people who will certainly try to help you to find solutions for your problems or use cases, recommend add-ons, recommend people who could help you, look at your tracebacks and tell you what might be going wrong there, and so forth. So that is like the stop number one. But also, at least when the pandemic is finally over, consider coming to a in-person event of Plone. And there's not only the conference, which is certainly awesome, especially in person, but there are plenty of sprints all the time throughout the year in various places. I've been to so many sprints in the past already, can't really remember, but they are exciting, and it's the best opportunity to learn developing Plone when you sit next to someone else who does that with you. If you sit with someone more experienced or less experienced, the communication and the working together, the pair programming, is what gets you forward a lot. If you are uncertain what's going on, just check Plone.org, and all the sprints and events are announced here. There have been a lot of online sprints recently for Volto and for Barceloneta LTS, which is the classic user interface for Plone 6, which will be a much updated version from what you saw as Plone Classic today and yesterday. And so this is the stop, the place where you find these. Also, a shout out to how, so I entered the Plone community by going to a user group meeting in Munich, and they helped me when I was a newbie. They answered my question. There was a mailing list also. I interacted with a mailing list, and I got suckered into Plone. And so now Plone is not only this one project I did with Plone. Plone is part of my life, and it pays for everything I have in my life. This house, this beer, even the rabbits outside, and they're no longer in the garden because there are foxes in this area, so we're putting them inside when it gets dark, even the rabbits. Yeah, so thank you for attending, and maybe let's start with a round of feedback. If you feel uncomfortable criticizing in public here, because the training is recorded, maybe we cut the recording now, I'm not sure. I hope it's being recorded. That was the plan. And but you feel free to comment by mail or in the forum. But I would like to have some maybe constructive or even destructive criticism to find out what we can improve. I say we because I'm channeling Katja here and all the other trainers who helped me and co-train this training with me in the past. Yeah. shoot. I'm gonna have a double IPA now. You have to unmute yourself if you want to say something. I would love to call you all out. Oh, can I, while you're working up your enthusiasm, your courage to speak, can I ask you all to make a group picture? So if you're still awake, switch on your camera shortly, and I make not a screenshot. I make a photo of all of us with my hopefully working camera here. So, okay, is that, yes. Hey-oh. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. Anyone courageous enough, unmute yourself and shoot. Okay. No feedback. Okay, questions, anything, just, we have, I can talk for the next 20 minutes, not a problem. But think of use cases, criticism. I take praise even, whatever.
Philip, what you've done is really great. There's only so much that I think any human can possibly try to shove into any other human's head in 2 days with as broad a scope as all this is. Maybe just a couple of exercises that are much smaller scope, like, okay, here are the 2 hands-on things we're going to make sure that we do. So you get a taste of Volto and what we can do today with Volto, as opposed to what we did in the past with Diazo and, you know, and creating standalone displays on top of Plone. We could just shrink that down maybe for your next 2-day exercise, like, and today we're going to do this one thing. Here's the end of the thing we'll do at the end of the day goal. And that way, because, you know, I just can't type that much. And I've been out of Plone for like 3 or 4 years. So moving back into it after having the last project I did was like a 4.2 project or something like that.
Oh my God.
Volto is a whole new game, and just the whole way it sets up and the way we front end it in front of Plone is completely different.
Yep.
So, you know, for a 2-day training, just like a taste, like, here's the one thing that I think I want you to take away from that you can do with Volto on top of Plone. But
yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Me with a ton of the things that I need to look at, and gave me tips on where I need to go look. And if I get a chance to go back and look at this for this next project I'm going to do, it'll help me immensely to just get a taste of all the bits and pieces I have to touch.
I'll certainly try that. Obviously, this is only half of the 2-day training that we usually do. And during the in-place training at the last conferences where we didn't do Volto, but still, we did not many, but we did a couple of exercises, and it is a lot of fun seeing everyone like struggling with whichever editor they're using and walking around the room. This is also why it is very productive to have 2 trainers, because one can always walk around the room and see, oh, you're stuck here. What's your problem? Let's fix that code checkout, for example. And there's a couple like quiet 5 minutes for solving this exercise. And I certainly recommend, for the Volto part, there are not so many exercises yet, sadly, because we focused on finishing the story and the code and the documentation here. For the Mastering Plone 5 training, there is a shit ton of exercises for almost every chapter, and we're trying to add more exercises in the Volto chapter. So you have like, okay, this is your basic view. Now with what you learned, do something and try to solve this, and you click on the button and you see the solution, and you can compare it with what you do. During in-place training, this is really rewarding to the attendees. Mm-hmm. So yes.
Yeah, and I've never touched React before.
There you go.
There you go.
Now you did.
I'll chime in. I'm not a developer, but I contract for projects. And so what I'm trying to find out is what can Plone do? And I've been following for a long time. And I realized, and by the way, this is a very hard task to blast through this much material to try and figure out what's important, or how do you organize it, or to me, how does it relate to each other? It's not just one thing after another, but some of the concepts are more important, some of them are more foundational. Now we're going to dig down into the weeds, and we're going to do something that you don't really need to know, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's very hard to do all of that. I do a lot of training too, and I know, and you've done a fine job here, Philip. One of the things I'm looking for, and I'll probably find it, this first conference I've ever attended, sort of, is figuring out how to talk to your Plone developer, how to talk to a developer about what Plone can do. Because what I'm noticing as you go through here is that there are, and I know the Volto folks are working against this, but there are 10 ways to do things. In fact, one of the questions I asked was a different way to do something that, and they're not all just 6 of one, half dozen of the other, doesn't really matter. There are implications down the road, and what, I don't know if you find this, but customers don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to tell you, do it this way, not that way, because next year it'll be different. So I guess all of that is just kind of my way of underscoring, yes, you did a fine job. This is a huge challenge. And B, there is this sort of way of thinking about what Plone can do for you and how to use it that sometimes falls in the gap between the customer and the developer to make decisions about how to organize a project. And I'm sure some developers are better at it than others, but as the person purchasing, it's a little hard to know and how to guide that conversation or find those people who can think about it at that level.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that problem. It's a big part of my job to translate client requirements to developer requirements. If I implement them myself or one of my coworkers or a subcontractor does that, it is very often my decision what architecture choice to make there. And it is two things. It is sad to say that, yes, you need a developer who is really versed in Plone to make a good decision there. That saves you time because he knows Plone and the ecosystem well enough to make a decision how to approach that. But the good thing is B, the training is, I consider it is not complete. There's not everything explained there, but for every task, there is only one solution explained there. There's not like, no, you write your vocabularies not as a class, but as a method, which is absolutely possible to do. But there's one way of, this is how you define your schemata. And so I consider a large part of my work writing this training is picking the correct approach, the best approach to solve a certain task. And I am very opinionated about these approaches, and I can get into very long discussions that are super tedious for people who are not core developers of Plone. But I understand that. So for you, you obviously need someone to guide you in these decisions, because without a lot of experience in Plone, you will not be able to make a good recommendation about how to solve a problem. But often you don't need to, because that's just the job of the developers in the end. This is the requirement. Check the community forum or the documentation for the best solution to that. If you know what you can do with Plone, and the answer is basically everything, but not everything is a good fit for Plone. There are few things that are a bad fit for Plone, but there are almost no things that are not possible to do in Plone. So I've seen weird things being done that are probably not a good idea, but it is, yeah, okay, how to get to a point there. It is, if you know the features and if you understand that Plone is extendable enough and has a huge ecosystem of add-ons and these little plugs that you can use to extend that. It is, and if you saw a couple of the example projects, if you, for example, looked at Quave, the Plone social intranet, if you looked at Volto and a couple of university sites and stuff like that, you'll get a basic idea that basically the sky's the limit, and the hard thing is to figure out how to get the most bang for your buck, basically, how to find how to solve, for example, the example what I showed earlier, the faceted search here. This doesn't look anything like Plone. It has like these little blocks here, and it has this search. It has 3 languages, and you have these modules that you can define where you search. There is actually not a lot of code in there. If you use the right parts of Plone in the right way and combine them in the same way, you get a blazing fast website that has features that you think you would probably require, I don't know, probably $100,000 to implement. So yeah, you need know-how, and the community is open enough to answer all of these questions. It's a hard learned experience. So a shout out to Alexander Pilz, for example. He's not doing that much development at the moment because he's running Syslab as a company, but he knows every nook and cranny in Plone so well. So if a customer comes to him with a requirement, he has a architectural solution in his mind that is mostly pretty good. And there are a lot of people in the community who operate on that level.
You know, I absolutely don't want to monopolize this conversation. Your time is and everything is just, this is just very, very valuable. I've started to wonder too, after following Plone for a while, are there opinionated stacks or distributions sort of developing within? I mean, you kind of saw this in the Volto world where Timo's got an opinion about how blocks ought to be, and EEA's got a different opinion. And we're going to, and Plone's a great community, right? They're going to talk it out. They're going to work it out. Are there sort of platforms on Plone that say, okay, we're going to give you these basic pieces. Here's how you do stuff on our platform?
Not really. There used to be more of that. So what definitely exists is, again, Quave, Plone intranet, but that's more of an application than a platform, because this is how it looks like. You don't theme me. You maybe put a logo and change a color, but this is an application. Then there's come again, Castle CMS. That is more it's not a social intranet. It's an intranet thingy. It was developed by Wildcard, and 6 Feet Up is using it, as far as I know. And it has opinionated code in it, but we used to have a time when there was a part of the community who did Grok and part of the community who did not. Grok is like decorator style registration of Python components for these open component architecture, but the community has decided that this is not the right approach. And currently, regarding backend development, there is not that, there are no dissenting opinions. There may be a couple of people who say, oh, I need to solve every one of my projects using the Node library, for example, not Node.js, the Node library. Some of you might know who I'm talking about. It's excellent for some use cases, and others have never heard of that and never touched that in their projects. I tend to keep things, and I strongly suggest, and I try to do that by example, to write code in a as simple as possible way. There is code that I encounter regularly. I'm going to give a lightning talk on relations, for example. That is blowing my mind because it's so complex, and there are probably no 3 people in the community who have the mental capacity to really understand what's happening there, and I'm certainly not one of these 3. So I think and it's also a result of the Plone community is branching out. It's getting wider because it includes the React people and all the front-end developers, because we're giving them, with the REST API, we're giving them excellent tools to develop their own applications, and they don't so much care about the sub-component architecture and all the complexities in there. So the backend code that they require and that they use is mostly rather simple, because it solves most of their use. You can solve most use cases there without reinventing some fancy new 5 times multi-adapter thingy. We actually have these. We have a 5 times multi-adapter in Plone for portlets. So I think the code that is being written by the Plone community gets easier to read, and I think that's a good thing. And yeah, we had huge discussions about should we use React or Angular or whatever, but yeah, it's a duocracy, or you could call that leading by example. You just write something, and if it's good enough, the community will follow and accept that. If it's crap, even though it's 100,000 lines of code, the community will not accept that. But Volto is excellent. It is, yes, it is a lot of code, but it works really well. It is really well extendable. If something similar would have been written in Vue or in, I don't know, something else, other people would be more happy, but I am more agnostic. I'm very interested in that it's maintainable, it's understandable by new developers, that they are able to understand the code that is developed, that's documented, and that it's as extendable as Plone is. Volto still has ways to go there. For example, it is not as nicely pluggable to write your custom add and edit views in Volto, or just dump in a new widget for this and that field. It is entirely doable because it's all React, but there are these. We have a lot of logic and know-how and customizability in the backend already, especially regarding dexterity content types and forms that do not exist in Volto yet. If you want that in Volto, write your own form. There you go. You can register your own form, but then you're on your own. You have to write that yourself. That's okay. We'll slowly get there. You can't expect Volto, which doesn't have 15 years on its back already, to be at the same state of maturity as the backend is. So this is not a complaint. It's just a statement of facts. So Jonathan, if you have a specific use case or a client who asks for whatever, feel free to contact me and ask me what I think about that. That's I'm totally open to do that. And ask the community. And I think you're knowledgeable enough to answer most of the questions, but the community is really open. People spend a lot of time helping others. There is also, I have not seen that in other open source communities at that level. It is a business, Plone. Well, not Plone itself, but most Plone communities are running a business. I run a business, but there is sometimes some competition, but it's very friendly and there's more cooperation than competition. So I'm doing a lot of projects together with other companies, more than like I have to compete with other companies to get a contract. It is, yeah, sometimes legal, not legal battles. I mean, sometimes it's a legal requirement to, okay, you have to have 3 bids for a contract and then you can do the project. But more often than not, large projects are a cooperation of either individuals or companies. And that's one thing that I really love about the Plone community is even though a lot of people make a living writing open source code because it's all GPL, if you write Plone, which doesn't mean you have to publish that, still belongs to the client, but it's still GPL. But the spirit of open source is, let's say, the force of open source is strong in the Plone community. Anyone has a use case that he wants to run by all of us and say, hey, I need, I don't know, this and that. Can we do this in Volto yet? Or is Plone a good fit for whatever, this shop, for example? No, a notoriously complicated subject. Well, if that's not the case, thank you is what's left to say. Thank you for your time for these 2 days. I hope you realized that it was fun for me to do that. It always is fun for me to do trainings, even though I'm hoarse afterwards. And I regret it a little. But the fun is usually more than the regret. I'll stop sharing my screen. No, no, this is the wrong button. This is the right button. And feel free to contact me or Katja or basically anyone during the conference or afterwards. Our contact information is we still need to add Katja to the trainers because, well, she didn't do it, but she will be added here. Hope she's going to be well soon. You can contact me and my company here if you need consulting or training or development. That's what we usually do. And so I hope you will have fun in the next couple of days at the conference. There's going to be an amazing couple of talks. And consider giving one yourself. The Plone community always is very open to case studies, especially by new people. It's not that we're all old hands. We're getting old with the community together, but there's always new influx, even if some of the people who are new to Plone already have a gray beard. We also have a lot of young hands who are coming into the community. So this is not a complaint, but please work up the courage to really join the community, make pull. Oh, I totally forgot to talk about the development process, but yeah. So yeah, I'm not gonna redo that now, but basically you can just write a ticket. If something is annoying, write a ticket. It's all on GitHub. There's products CMF Plone. It's all linked to from Plone.org. It's all well documented. It's all mentioned there. If there's a bug in the training, I actually fixed 2 bugs this morning, and I'll have to fix 2 others that we encountered today. GitHub is where the code discussion happens. Community Plone.org is where also code, but everything else also happens. Like discussion is, for example, which add-on is useful for? Is it a good idea to do that? Can we meet and talk about this and that? So there's a lot of openness and a lot of ways to interact with the community. And yeah. And please consider coming to an in-person event. I know the community is spread out through all over the world. When we have real like in-place conferences, we have a competition who travels the longest, and that is sometimes really crazy. People take 2 to 3 days to actually get to the place of the conference because they come from New Zealand, South Africa, Japan, Northwest America, or Europe, and to the conferences somewhere else. So we have or South America. We're in all places, kinds of places. If you're new, welcome. If you're still there after all these years, I'm really happy about that. I'm with you, and have a fun conference. And thank you for attending this training. It was a lot of fun to give it. Bye-bye.